that Deirdre McSorley is retiring after innumerable years in the planning service and the last sort of 6 odd years in FODC. I know Deirdre outside in social capacity as well, but I've known her for innumerable years when she was in the planning service in Enniskillen and then went to Omagh. And all I can say is from personal experience is that she's anything but the consummate professional. I appreciate what she did in the service, and actually I appreciate how she has helped the staff that transferred over from planning service into the council integrate into the council in 2015 in such a way that everyone, I think, both of the officers that transferred over, the officers that were here and then working with them, and I believe the majority of councillors that have had any action with them, consider that those staff are now FODC staff and they do not consider themselves old planning service. And I think that's actually to be welcomed, and it is a great compliment to Deirdre. We will miss her with regard to her experience, both leading on the development side on the planning committee, but also on the local development plan. And on the back of that as well, unfortunately, we're losing another member of staff who transferred over, Hilda Clements. She has decided to go off into the sunset and enjoy a different approach to life going on, and she is actually leaving the council at the end of March. So I thank her for her service as well. That actually has meant that there's some internal reshuffling with regard to positions. Those of you who have been on the development plan side will have worked now with Sinead McAvoy, who transferred over from Mid-Ulster, and she is working alongside Hilda and Sinead McCurry on the local development plan. With Deirdre leaving us, Sinead is standing into a position of oversight, not necessarily straight into Deirdre's position, because there is some internal reworking with regard to management structures. And in the back of Sinead moving, Paul McDermott, who a lot of you will know from the Enniskillen office as Principal Planning Officer, is actually stepping over to gain sideways experience and stepping into Sinead's position temporarily in the local development plan side. In Paul's absence, we get Louise Stewart coming across from Omagh, and she will be actually working out of the Enniskillen office. Louise's position, I don't believe, is immediately going to be backfilled in Omagh. It's going to be taken up. So there's a bit of jiggery-pokery going on. That aside, we will miss Deirdre with regard to her experience and the way she has worked so effectively in the council and has led her staff. All I can say is to Sinead, on the other hand, you have fairly big shoes to fill. I know you're up to the job, even with the short time that I've worked with you on the development plan side. I know you as a capable, consummate professional, and that you will rise through to the position. I also understand that Paul and Louise will actually take up the challenges of new positions as well. So that said, I'm actually going to do a small presentation now to Deirdre of some flowers. I'm going to take my headset off and just say a few words to Deirdre. And no laughing, Councillor Smith. I can see you in your skybox. I appreciate, members, we've deviated from the agenda slightly, but I'm sure you will put up with that. I have two councillors who maybe want to speak on this issue before I go on to the agenda as set. Councillor Deehan, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to personally express my thanks to Deirdre for all her excellent work and for guiding us through the planning process, and particularly in my own case, coming into planning a couple of years ago. I found her guidance extremely beneficial, and we're certainly going to miss all that wisdom and experience. But it's a milestone in your life, Deirdre, and I do wish you every happiness and enjoyment in your future years. And just to also acknowledge Hilda Clements and thank her for her contribution and wish her well in her retirement. And also to wish all those planning officers who are stepping up to new roles every success in their new areas. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. I've Councillor Glenn Campbell. Glenn.
Yes, Chairman, well, I too want to be associated with your words and that of Councillor Deans in support of Deirdre and Hilda at this time. There's no doubt there's been a huge amount of change, no doubt over the course of both Deirdre and Hilda's career, but I've been, I suppose, privileged to witness change of the amalgamation of the council, which and then later the development of planning powers, and I think those are significant events, you know, for our council. But certainly Deirdre's role in the planning powers being devolved, and that of Hilda was very significant, and then she had to deal with all of that as well. So she certainly has earned a very long and happy retirement. I wish her well, and I wish Hilda well as well in any future plans. And I also want to wish Sinead, Paul and Louise the best of luck in their new roles. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Before I go on, I've got a call-in user 2, please. Could you confirm your identity? Is that Councillor Clark by any chance? Call-in user 2, please. Councillor Clark. Yeah. Call-in user 2, if you could come back to me as quickly as possible just to identify who you are. I've got now Councillor Thompson. Earl.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And like the previous two councillors who have spoken, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of myself and our party grouping to wish Deirdre McSorley and Hilda Clements all the very best in, well, Deirdre's retirement and Hilda maybe moving on to different pastures. We'll leave it at that. And I want to thank them for all their work, and I've enjoyed working with them over the past number of years on the planning committee and on the local development plan as well. Can I take this opportunity to wish Sinead, Louise and Paul all the very best as they take up different roles within the planning department of FODC, and wish them all the best in the future that lies ahead. Thank you again, Chairman, for allowing me in.
Thanks very much, Earl. Councillor Garrity, Mary.
Thank you, Robert. And just to be brief, because I know you've an agenda, but just to wish Hilda and Deirdre all the best, two very professional in their role and always been very helpful to me and indeed to others. And our loss will be their families, our pastors' news gain, certainly. I think Deirdre, with the golf, will have a wonderful time. And even dancing that Jerusalem challenge, I'm trying to see that horror. I recognise some faces, but with these masks, there's a couple of blondies there. But wish them all the best, and commiserations to Sinead, Louise and Paul that aren't going to get moving on yet. But they'll just have to put up with us for another while. But wishing them all the very best in their roles as well. Thanks, Robert.
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I for some reason or other do not have a hand to raise, but I'm very thankful for that I'm for even speak. So I'm not going to
Bert, yeah, you don't need a hand to raise. I'll tell you when you come in, and I'll look after you. Don't you worry. Okay.
I just wanted to wish Deirdre and Hilda all the best. I worked with them for now around 20 years, and we didn't always agree on things, but we always got them sorted out somewhere or other. So we're very thankful for that, and I do wish both of them really the young people yet compared with some of us, but I would wish them a happy retirement anyway. And to the staff that are moving to other positions, I would also enjoy hopefully working with them, and all the best. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Bert. Councillor Smith, Chris, you're last up.
So I suppose I was going to speak on behalf of this party. I think the non-committee member has kind of stolen my thunder, you know. But look, I suppose I've had the pleasure of working with Deirdre, especially from both sides of the committee, both sort of coming in from the outside, as an advocate, and then whenever I was appointed by my party group onto the planning committee itself. Look, I know you're under time pressure, so I mean, there's stuff I'd like to say, but I won't. The individuals involved should be aware that certainly as a party, we've certainly valued their guidance and their steady hand at the wheel, and wish them all the best in whatever they choose to do in the future. Thank you,
That's
Chair.
brilliant. Before I bring Deirdre in, just to reply, could call-in user 2 please identify themselves again? Councillor Clark, by any way? Sean? Star set mute.
Robert,
Yeah.
James here in IT. Maybe get Damien to mute the user. Maybe they might be having problems on meeting.
Unmuting? Can't do it. Can't do it, James. We'll have to see if Councillor Clark waves at me at some stage. Right, Deirdre, you want to come in now, and then we can move on.
Members, I've been sort of caught on the hop here, so I've nothing really prepared, but thank you all very, very much for your kind wishes. Certainly for me, it's been a pleasure working with you over the last 6 years. And I'm not sure if it's because I've done my planning qualification in England, but my view has always been that the planning decisions should be made by our elected members. And I have to say, I've enjoyed working with the planning committee, and I think we work very well together. We may not always agree, as Councillor Wilson says, but that's democracy in motion. And you know, decisions are made taking account of all the material considerations and are justified. So good luck to everybody going forward, and hopefully we continue to make good planning decisions and look after Fermanagh and Omagh, our lovely district council area. I know planning's in safe hands with Sinead and Darren and Louise and Martin and Paul and all the staff, with the guidance of Kim and Alison there to keep us right and keep us on track. So thank you very much, and as I say, I wish everybody all the best going forward, and as I say, I will keep an eye on planning, maybe not as involved as I should be, but certainly there's a lot of things happening in our district which is of interest, so I will be keeping a little sort of ear to the ground and a look in at some of the things that are happening. But thank you very much.
Deirdre, thank you very much indeed. That was completely out of the blue for Deirdre, and thank you very much for your perseverance, members, in regard to that. We'll now start the agenda properly. Item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies today? No. We'll move on to item 2. I have signed the minutes of the 2 meetings, including the confidential minutes. So I'll go on and see item 3. Any declarations of interest in any regard to items on the agenda today? Take that as no, thank you. So we'll go on to the, sorry, who's that? Chris? Councillor Smith?
Yes. I suppose I would sort of, I understand that declarations of interest are obviously for the individual to decide. However, being involved in a planning application as an advocate when I wasn't on the committee on the same site as one that is currently being discussed today, different application, different applicant. I was wondering whether that would be whether it would be expected upon me to declare an interest.
I think so. If you're asking for me personally, I would declare an interest. So, but it's up to you. I think there could be a perception that there might be an interest that you would have to declare. So, are you going to declare an interest then?
Yes,
Chris?
I am, and I haven't got the I haven't got it.
Which applicant?
The listen one.
That's item 7 on the agenda and application number 3. So we'll make a note of that, and you can declare an interest on that and just withdraw from anything. Right, thanks very much. If you could take your hand down. Right, I'll go through the minutes on the 27th of January for matters arising. And that's not the confidential minutes, that's just the ordinary minutes. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11. Okay. Nothing out of that. We'll go on to the matters arising out of the meeting on the 17th of February. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Thank you very much, members. We'll go on now to item 6 on the agenda, and there's one application, and that's up on the screen, LA 10/2020/1058, and I'll hand over to Darren. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, members. So application 1 then is LA 10/2020/1058. It's a full application for the installation of a lighting scheme at the existing car park in Lisnelly Avenue, Omagh. The applicant then, as you can see, is the council, and the recommendation is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 3 conditions. So I'll just take you through the details, members. On the screen then is the site location plan. So the site's identified with a yellow star with the red outline around the boundary. You can see then Lisnelly Avenue is the green arrow heading in off the road up towards the Grange Council offices, which are in the approximate position of the black rectangle. And just looking then at another map just to show you the location again. I'm sure members know it well. So you can see Lisnelly Avenue runs across the frontage of the 2 areas of car parking, which are identified by the yellow stars. You can see the Grange Park on one side, and then there's residential properties, so a number of houses to the northwest. You have St. Pat's Park then on the other side, and then some other houses then facing onto the Mountjoy Road. Again, just looking at more details then, members, you can see the access coming in off the Lisnelly Avenue, the 2 areas of car parking. And then an important material consideration obviously will be the impact on the neighbours. The nearest neighbours really affected would be number 1 and number 2. And those are shown on the map at the top of the screen. If we look then on the aerial photograph, again, you can see the access coming in where the purple arrow is, the 2 areas of car parking, and then the 2 properties, number 1 and number 2, to the northwest. So that's just a photograph looking towards the property that's beside the site, the fronts onto the avenue. And then you can see the other property then, which sits in behind that property with the trees and boundary hedges around it. So the proposal then, as members will note from the report, is for new floodlighting. So that's the design of the floodlights. So a 6-metre high pole with the lights then on top of it. And those will be located throughout the car park on the areas identified by the green circles. So you can see the yellow stars in the upper and the lower car park, with the circles then identifying the position of the lights. An important consideration, members, is the impact of the lights on the neighbours and on the wider character of the area. They're designed to shine inwards towards the car parking areas only, and prevent any light spillage outside of the car park. So you can see the lights spill then on the screen, lights. And then the supporting information includes a photograph or a drawing showing that light spill then on the car park. And you can see it shines inward towards the car park with minimal shining outside onto the green areas and onto the neighbour properties. And that's just another drawing then showing the light spill that'll come from the new lights. And you can see outside of the car park and outside of the green areas, there's limited light being shown. So the recommendation then, members, is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 3 conditions.
Thank you very much, Darren. Any questions for Darren? Councillor Robinson? Oh, sorry, your hand down again. Yeah, back up. Paul? Councillor Robinson?
Thanks,
Paul?
Chair. Just going to recommend approval.
That's okay. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Rainey? Alan?
Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Josephine, do you want to comment?
Well, Chair, I was just going to ask Darren about the impact on bats, if he could comment on that. And also, from the presentation that Darren has made, I do feel that the design of the lights and the positioning of the lights are such that, you know, it won't result in significant light nuisance to nearby residents. But in terms of the impact on wildlife and bats in particular, do we know, are there bats in that region? And secondly, you know, the objectors are concerned that it will detract from the, you know, the residential and private quality of this area. So could I just have a comment on those 2 points, please, Chair? Thank you.
No problem. Darren?
Yes, members, if you note within the report on page 7, under the section PPS2 Nature Conservation, there's 3 paragraphs where the impact upon bats is considered. There's numerous information and a couple of reports within the application that provide information on the level of bat activity in the area, and also then the impacts of the floodlights upon the bats. The outcome and the findings of all those reports is that there's no harm. The council has consulted NIA, who would provide advice on this and would be the experts, and they've come back just saying that they're content. There's no significant impact upon the local bat population. So it would meet PPS 2. In terms then of the residential amenity of the area, again, within the report that's fully considered under the 2 sections there in part 8. The area has a high level of residential amenity at the moment, and the new lights will not detract from that or take away from that, and they're designed sympathetically to shine inwards, so they won't be shining out towards any nearby properties, and therefore there's no harm to their residential amenity.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Okay, Josephine?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I have a proposal duly seconded to go with the officer's recommendation. All agreed? Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson, before I do that. Earl?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I suppose in a similar vein to Councillor Dahan, and although there have been concerns expressed by some of the neighbours, and I think what Darren has said, and during his presentation, a lot of those things have been reassured me, as what he said, and during his presentation as well. So I'm happy enough at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
That's great, Earl. Thanks very much indeed. Sorry, going on, I've got a proposal that we go with his officer's recommendation for approval. All agreed? I don't see any dissension. I'll take that as unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on now to item 7, and we have 4 applications on the called-in list. First application is LA 10/2020/0575. I have a request coming in on this from the agent on behalf of the applicant, who couldn't, because of personal reasons, not stated what the personal reasons were, that they couldn't make the meeting to actually speak on it, and there was a request to defer. Members, it's up to you, but my personal opinion is, and we've had this before, if for whatever reason people can't get and apply for speaking rights, they should get a substitute in. Everything's in front of us to actually determine this, and Councillor McCann has speaking rights, and he can quite adequately speak on behalf of the applicant. Councillor Deehan?
Well, Chair, in making determinations, you know, I would take careful note of representations from the applicant or the agent, and you know, often that brings insights that are not immediately obvious from reading the reports, and for that reason, I would propose that we should grant this applicant a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Right, Councillor Campbell, Glenn.
Yes, Chairman. Well, I would agree with Councillor Deegan. I would second her proposal here, Chairman, in this instance. And I take your point about the substitute. That would have been an option, perhaps, but in this case, it hasn't happened. I would support the deferral.
Deirdre, do you want to say something?
Mute. Just to advise members that when an application gets called in, we notify the applicant. And at that stage, they would be aware which planning committee meeting the application would be taken to. So it's unfortunate that they wait until it's actually listed for hearing before they actually inform us that they're not available to attend. They could have done that back at the time when they were notified that the application was called in. In addition, they cannot add any new information, so all the information should be on the file. And really, all the agent and applicant are doing is highlighting issues within that, but the information's on the file. So if there's anything members are unclear about, we should have that information available to be able to respond to questions. If it's not on the file, then the applicant agent can't introduce it anyway because it would be considered new information. So on that basis, I do have concerns about deferring the application, given that our protocol advises that we should only do it in exceptional circumstances.
Thanks very much, Deirdre. Councillor Thompson, Earl, you want to say something?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I take on board what yourself, Chair, and Deirdre have said. However, I'm a great believer then that the applicant, I don't know what the applicant reason for not attending is, but I know we have considered these things in the past, and most people have had a good excuse of why they weren't able to attend. But I think in the I suppose, with respect and fairness to all, I would be inclined to agree with Councillor Deegan that this be deferred and that we give the applicant the opportunity of being here. Here what Deirdre's saying that nothing can really change, but the applicant can have their say, and I think that should be granted to them. So I'm happy enough to go that this be deferred for that reason, Chair. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor McCann, I know you've got your hand up and you have speaking rights here, but essentially this is a committee decision. Thanks. Right, we have a proposal duly seconded to defer for a month so that the agent can actually get speaking rights and present in front of the committee. All agreed? I see no dissension, so that's agreed. Councillor McCann, Stephen, I think you're up later on. No, you're not actually, I don't think.
I think that's me for the day, Chair.
Yeah, that's you for the day. You can go and take a coffee, Stephen. Thanks very much. Hopefully I'll see you next month. Right, thank you. Take care. Right, bye. We'll go on now to application number 2, and that's LA 10/2020/1178, proposed dwelling and domestic carriage on a farm for W. Crawford. Darren?
Okay, members, so application 2 then is LA 10/2020/1178. It's an outline application for a proposed dwelling and domestic garage on a farm from Mr. Crawford, and the recommendation then is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report, subject to the one reason. Mistake. So on the screen then, members, is one of the applicant's farm map. There's an extensive holding here, but this is the important one insofar as it identifies the fields which the applicant has control of within his business. And it's centered around the farm group, which is the red star, as you can see down in the bottom of the corner of the slide, with the purple star then identifying the position of the proposed site. So the applicant's site location plan then again shows the position of the farm group in red with the red star, sorry. The site location then is the red outline that's on the screen. and runs along the road up to the area with the green shading on it, which is identified as the preferred siting. And this is the site address for the proposed dwelling. So just taking that onto another map just to show members the separation between the farm group. So it's approximately 150 metres along the road with a gap in between the site and the farm group. Just if you can overlay that onto the aerial photograph again, you can see the position of the site then and its contacts with the farm group and the intervening fields and the nature of the road then with the bends along the front of the site. Between the two is about 150 metres. So taking some critical views then, members, if you're down at the bottom in the farm group, looking along the road in the direction of the purple arrow, what the site then would be up towards the northeasterly direction. So if you're standing down in that farm group looking up the road, that's what you would see. And these are photographs provided by the agent very helpfully. So you can see the farm group then on the left, and the site then is identified by the arrow. And again, in the bottom right, you can see a slide just showing where we are and the critical views then looking up the road. So you can see the fields then in between the proposed site and the farm group then. And again, if we just were to come back down the road slightly, you can see the farm group in front of you, the farm buildings, the farm dwelling, and then the application site is further along the road to the right. So if we just take another slide then, if you're standing at the edge of the farm group, so it'll be on our left, and you're looking along the road towards the direction of the site. Again, that's what you can see. So you're standing, the farm group's just on your left, and that's where the car's parked as an access laneway going into the farm group. And you can see then the road continues on, the field hedges along the boundaries, and then the site then is on the far end of the slide. So turning around then, and you're up at the far end of the road looking back towards the site, and in the position of the yellow star. And that's the view there. So you're standing along the public road looking towards the site, which is just, you can see identified there by the applicant, with the farm buildings then and the farm dwelling further along the road. And again, then members, so if you just take that slide, if you were to go back out behind you there, out towards the country, and you're looking back towards the application site, you can see then the trees and hedges around you and the field boundaries. The site then is identified by the position of the arrow with the farm buildings then behind you. So as part of the application, the applicant has made the case that there was an old building on the site and has provided a map showing this. So that's on the slide there in front of you. And you can see there were buildings formerly on the site. However, those have all been removed and there's nothing to show on the site that there were any buildings there. It's a green field, a green agricultural field, which has been grassed. So as I say, members, as part of the application, alternative sites are a material consideration and an important part of looking at these applications. If we're standing in the position of the yellow star looking towards the farm group down the public road, so you'll be looking at the farm group on your right. As you look down the road, you can see the field to the right would be number 22, and the field below the road then is field 2B. So a position of a new dwelling on either of those two fields would visually link and group with the existing farm buildings and meet all planning policy tests. And that's just a slide in a photograph showing the view down the road towards the farm group, which is on the right. And you can see the grouping there, a group of buildings, and field 22 on the right. Left of the road then is field 2B, which is the galvanized gate on the left-hand side. And you can see there's a small field there, and a new dwelling there would be consolidated and grouped. It would be another side of the road, members, but would still fit in with the existing buildings and be considered to meet planning policy. And that's just another photograph of it. And that's a photograph then of the farm group. And as I say, the field there in front, or a position then on the right-hand side of the wooden fence, would visually link and group with the buildings and meet the policy tests. Those sites would be within the red line of the application site and therefore could be considered under this application if the applicant was willing to amend the siting and move it further up the road closer towards the farm building, so it wouldn't require a new planning application. So Summary, just members of the reasons for refusal. It's that the proposal is contrary to policy and that the proposed site is not visually linked or sited to cluster with an established group of buildings on the farm. And the alternative site is not an exception, as there are alternative sites up at the farm group. And also, in addition, there's no demonstrable health and safety reasons or verifiable plans to expand the business down at the group, which would justify an alternative site elsewhere on the farm.
Thanks very much, Darren. Look, we've representations from the agent, Mr. David Young, and from two councillors, Councillors Wilson and Clark, which I'll come to later. Mr. David Young, could you identify yourself, please? We're just not sure. Are you calling user 2? Hello? David?
Chair, Bert here.
Yeah, Bert, yeah.
David Young is on his way to a wedding, but he had hoped to link in with the applicant from somewhere in Fermanagh.
That's
And
okay.
he left my house, he left me off some paperwork, but it's only about half an hour ago, so I don't know where he is at this minute in time, but he did intend linking in.
That's all right. If we don't get him, there is a call-in user too, Bert, and he is not identified, or they are not identifying themselves at the moment. They're on mute.
It's normally Councillor Clark that comes in on user 2.
No, Councillor Clark is in by himself. I see, Sean. There's no problem at all. I'll try again. David Young, are you calling user 2?
Sorry, whoever the call-in user 2 is, if you press star and 6 on your device, it will unmute you to come in. So that's star and 6.
Thanks, Damien.
Hello?
Hello, who is this?
Hello? Can I be heard now at the moment?
You can, yes. And who are you, please?
Hello, my name is David McGrew. It's regarding an application for a dwelling in a garden on the Dublin Road.
No, sir, yeah, that's all right, Mr. McGrew. You are speaking as an objector on the next application. That's all right. If you could mute yourself again, we've got you now. I'll call you in whenever that is required, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGrew. Now we know who you are. Right, brilliant. David Young, you're still not here? In the absence of David Young, I'll have to go on to the two councillors. That's Councillors Wilson and Clark. Bert and Sean, you have 5 minutes between you. Who's going first, Bert or Sean? Bert? Councillor Wilson? It's not like you to be quiet. Councillor Wilson, come on.
Sean can go ahead and I'll come in after.
That's okay. Councillor Clark, are you happy to go? Sean? Councillor Clark? Councillor Clark? I'm definitely in virgin territory here. Can you hear me now, Sean?
Can you hear me now, Chef?
Yep. You're going to go first. Bert's going to come in after you. I'll give you 2.5 minutes. I'll let you know when time is up.
Is David here, David Young?
No, we can't get David. He's not on the system and I've tried. So you're going to have to go without him.
Right, okay. I'll just give me a little second here to get my... Right, well, well, thank you, Chair and members, for being here today. The support submitted list covers a large part of what I wish to say, but there are a few small items I'd want to highlight. Appendix 5.2 shows the outline of the former building. The preferred site is the site of the former dwelling, and as a result, it is landscaped. This is indicated in photograph 4. This is, by the way, this is part of Mr. Young's presentation I'm reading from here.
That's okay, Sean.
Go on. New dwelling to integrate very well into the landscape. The access will be in the vicinity of where the vehicle appears in the picture and is on a straight stretch of the road, resulting in minimal loss of hedge to form visibility space. Forward sight distances can be achieved between the original hedge lines. On the easterly approach to the site, photo 4, there is no appreciation of the separation between the proposed dwelling and the farmyard, as they both read together as one. From a westerly direction, the local topography and coverage of the Droit Road and other dwellings and the farm complexes mean there is again little sense of segregation between the new dwelling and the farmyard. There is also a good degree of intervening vegetation tree cover. This is referred to in point 3.2 of the supporting statement, where CTY 10 refers to this type of site. As well as the landscape benefit of the preferred site, it is also for the future benefit of the farm. The applicant's farm is quite extensive and consists of dairy and sheep.
Left.
Right,
Go on,
sheep
Sean,
enterprise. 310 acres are farmed. Approximately 140 acres is owned and the remainder rented. As the farm continues to grow and develop, the land adjacent to the farm will be necessary to allow for additional more modern buildings that are necessary to facilitate the future development of this building. The fields around the farm are important asset in the day-to-day run on the farm, and at most time of the year, but particularly during lambing and calving season. The dairy enterprise consists of 150 cows and 50 other breeding stock associated with the cows. The sheep enterprise consists of approximately 4,500 lambs that are fattened each year and 200 breeding sheep. The cattle sheds adjacent to the open sides facing in the direction of the pro site and emit odours associated with the farming operations. The alternative site offered by the planning service considerably increases the risk of smells affecting the amenities of the...
It's you out of time, Sean.
Okay, well, I'll let Bert take over then.
Bert, can you take over now?
Yes, Chair. I will not repeat what Councillor Clark said, but
No.
I will take it on from that.
Yep.
This is an extensive farm, as you could obviously get from what Councillor Clark said. The dwelling that existed there, and we can't deny that it's on the map that a dwelling on a farmyard did exist there. The fellow unfortunately tossed it a number of years ago. As Councillor Clark said, the fields around the farmyard are really needed for a young farmer working on his own, for to calve cows in, ewes getting for lambing, and the young lad is getting married and moving into this. The roadway around the farm is not suitable for an exit, but the house that was previously there, it has already the sight lines and everything else in that area where he would rather have the site. The odours and danger of from the farmyard are as a problem as well in health and safety. At one stage on one of the maps, it shows that there was a sheep dip in that field. If it's not there, it was there, and that is really a poisonous, and the land there would be contaminated. So the site that the applicant has put forward, in my opinion, is the ideal site, and I would support the application. So that is really the it and the crux, and I'm sorry that, and I'm sure he's sorry as well, that the applicant did get waylaid, and he may be, if you wish to try him again, he may be available. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bert. Thank you for that. Councillor Garrity, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Chair. I was going to kind of come in before Sean spoke, but it's maybe just something I want to point out. I think really what we had there, with the greatest respect to Bert and Sean, a bit of a pointless exercise. We need the planning agent, David Young, here, because we're not allowed to ask either Bert or Sean questions, and indeed they're not qualified as from an agent's perspective to give answers that we might have on this. So we don't want to defer items, we said that, but I don't know what is, I know there's a wedding being mentioned, but for me to make a decision and answer questions, I would really need David Young in the meeting. Unfortunately, he's got tied up, but I don't know other members find the same. I find it difficult to make a decision without the agent's 10-minute presentation here, who can be questioned. So I don't know how the members feel, but I'll leave it at
Chair,
that.
The applicants.
Oh, no, sorry, Bert.
The
Sorry, I'm going to cut across.
applicants-
No, Bert, I'm cutting across you. I understand what you've said before. We appreciate that, but it's now a committee decision. You've had your time to speak. You can't say anything more. Sorry. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I tend to agree with Councillor Garrity. I certainly understand what the officer would say, that no information can be brought, and it's only really a presentation sort of exercise. But it's certainly, I think it's a very valuable part of the decision-making process, and I think trying to make decisions, and certainly, there are kind of there are principles that the committee should be sort of and have to adhere to. That the idea that we kind of need all the information on the table. I think it's too important a part of the decision making process to proceed without it. And I was wondering, I'm not sure if Councillor Garrity actually did make. No, she's shaking her head at me. I mean, and maybe it's too early, Chair, and if it is, certainly feel free to cut across me. But I genuinely think that we can't make a decision on this. Therefore, a deferral is really our only option, and it doesn't sit well with me. But it's making the right decision is more important than making a decision now, in my opinion.
That's okay. I have three more councillors, but I will say something from the chair. It is not necessarily incumbent that an applicant's agent has to be here. We have the information and we can make a determination, but I appreciate what you're saying. The agent can actually bring a perspective to any application, I suppose, that can't be completely put down in words. But what I want to say is here, this is the second application on the list today that through no circumstances or fault of ours, the agents duly notified have not been able to appear. So I'll put down a marker that I would not like this committee to be driven by the availability of agents. I think we have the competencies and the information to hand to determine, sorry, don't cut across me, to determine any application. But that said, the way forward is within your hands. So if you are making a proposal, Councillor Smith, that is fair enough. We will put it to the committee. Hold on, Deirdre. Councillor Smith?
Yes, I am making that as a proposal then.
Okay. Councillor Deehan?
Well, thank you, Chair. Well, I support the comments of Councillor Garrity and Smith, that if Councillor Garrity wants to second Councillor Smith's proposal, I will support it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a proposal to defer. I'm not going to take any more debate on this. I think the feeling I can see within the committee is to defer because the agent is not available. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Again, I'm going to comment from the chair. If this is a recurring feature, I think we as a committee will have to take a decision with regard to who actually runs the business of the committee. Is it the agents on behalf of the applicants, or is it we as a committee members moving forward? So we'll go on to application number 3, LA 10/2020/0181.
I've my hand up there, Robert.
What for, Anthony? Go ahead.
I've been trying to agree with you there. I want to dissent from that decision. I think we should have went on with them. I just agree with you. So can I dissent from it?
That's okay. Councillor Rainey, I apologise, I jumped past you as well. Councillor Rainey?
I'm coming. Here am I. Chairman, did I
yes,
pick it up? Is it the agent or is it the applicant is getting married?
We are not sure, Alan, but that is coming from Councillor Wilson, and I'm not going to go back and try and find out. I believe that Mr. Young is going somewhere. It's got nothing to do with the applicant. So look, but move on to number 3.
I'm happy enough to support it.
That's okay. Darren?
Chair, it's Louise Stewart will be presenting this one.
Will it? Oh, I apologise, Louise. Sorry.
You're okay.
Right, on you go.
Application number 3 is LA 10 2020 0181. It's a full application. It's a proposed domestic garage with retaining wall and provision of a new access. The location is at 3 Lissanon Court, Omagh. The applicant is S. Donnelly, and the recommendation here today is to refuse. You'll see here the site. It is off the Dublin Road, just as you're coming into Omagh. It's the old Dublin Road as you're coming into Omagh. The site is in Lissanon Court. What you'll see is a small court that has semi-detached houses within the development, and this site backs onto the Dublin Road. So you'll see it there, just the Dublin Road is just along the wider road there to the back of the site over to the east, and there you'll see the aerial. The red circle just shows up small wee housing development, and you'll see all the wee semis. You'll see there the Dublin Road marked on the map with the yellow star, just showing that area to the back of that semi-detached house that the proposal is to create an access in there and to put a garage in there as well. This is a layout that has been submitted. The application was with the committee back in November, and it was deferred to allow additional information to be made to the application. In this instance, the layout's been amended to include levels within the site, a turning area that shows the vehicles that can turn and exit the site. There's steps also added into the back of the garage, and a wee retaining wall there. So just to show, because there's a difference in levels between the existing house, the site falls down towards the Dublin Road, and the steps will allow access kind of from the rear of the existing house down onto the rear of the site once the site's been levelled off to try to accommodate the garage. You just see that a wee bit closer up. And you'll see there the star that shows the house, the location of the house. The arrow at the minute shows where the access comes out in and out for this house presently. The site has been fenced off with no access really down onto Dublin Road at present. The access for the house at the minute is where that arrow points out into the court. These are the levels that have been submitted with the application since the deferral, which shows how the site will be levelled off with cut to try and accommodate the garage. The garage you'll see is at a lower level than the house to the rear of it, and that then will then fall down onto the Dublin Road. So you'll see that there is quite a climb there, but he has been able to accommodate the levels of the site, pulling the site down to show that the garage could be accommodated into the site rather than filling the site. And for this reason then we have dropped the reason for refusal in terms of levels and that within the site. We had an issue in the previous back in November with the finishes of the garage. This is the amended plans which show the garage now being built in red brick, which is similar to the house. And again, you can see the steps and the retaining wall along the side. Fundamentally, the design on that is appropriate to the style of the house that's on site, and this then meets with PPS 7 addendum in relation to the style of the garage and the finishes and that to match the house. From the road, you'll see this is a Dublin Road, and this is where you're coming up to the site. The red arrow just shows the entrance from the Dublin Road. There was at one stage in past a hedge that came down along the front of the site, and that was removed some time ago. And the red line across the front, that's the extent of the site that we are going to look at today. This here is the site. Now, this picture was taken back in November, and you will see that there is a high fence on the east side there, where between the two neighbours, so you can see the extent of that fence in there that provides kind of that amenity area, protects that from that side. It's a small plot of land, and you can see it rises up behind the back of the semi. The fence to the back of the site, that is a fence that has been used to separate the site off from the back of the semi-detached house to the back, but that house at the back is part of this plot as one. Again, you can see that fence and the height of it as you're down at kind of street level, and the level of integration that you can get, and amenity kind of protection there that comes from the height of that fence from this side. Up to the back again, these photos here were taken just this morning, and you can see the trees that have been planted along the back fence there. This is new into the site, but again, you can see how the site rises up. This view here is common as you're coming from the town centre down the Dublin Road. You'll see the site is marked with the arrow down, and you'll see the backdrop of mature kind of trees there along that boundary, and the fence just with that person standing at that light pole. So that is the site as you're coming along this road. You'll see the houses. The court into the back is the semis, the red houses. You can see they're at a higher level and they're set back, and they are their own identity within the local character. Whereas the houses here along the front, these ones that are white closest to us, they're large detached houses which front on to the Dublin Road. So I think it's important maybe to set in context the character of the area along the Dublin Road. The red arrow at the bottom, that's the location of the site. And as you go along the road, you'll see that most of the plots along this road front onto the Dublin Road, but are accessed via the rear and don't actually access onto Dublin Road. The one closest to the site, that has been a new house that has been there, but has recently gotten approval for a site to come out onto the Dublin Road, for an access to come out. This access was approved as part of an application, was also involved amending the design of that house, so that house was changed so that it visually looked like it was fronting onto the road. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. To the north, you'll see the other houses that access out onto Dublin Road. Again, they're large detached houses sat back, fronting the road, and they have accesses down onto the road. But again, all the houses front onto the Dublin Road. This site that we're looking at with the red arrow, it's backing onto the Dublin Road. So when we're driving up along the Dublin Road, you will see into the back of the property. So this is a site here I was saying that had the access that had been recently approved. You'll see it's inside that circle, and the access comes out now where the yellow arrow comes out. And this is it from the road edge, and you can see it has been designed, it has been amended to be a forward-facing house, and the access comes in around the front, so your car's parking up around the front of the site with garden space, and it's at a much lower level than the application site, and you can see how that works and why it was approved, because it works along with other houses along that road. And again, you can see them individual houses coming along. Now, the next two houses there, the white one, the cream one and the white one, again, front-facing houses, but access to them is not off the Dublin Road. So there's an established character along this road, and it's quite good in that you're really coming from rural countryside into that urban context with a lot of vegetation, a lot of garden, and you're kind of coming into an area where it's not as high density. So there's a good established character within this area. And this is as you further go on up, you'll see in there on the right at the walls, that is the council's graveyard in there on the right hand side along the Dublin Road, for those who know where that is. And again, you see that context of none of the sites coming out directly onto the Dublin Road, and any houses that are along that are front facing out onto the Dublin Road. Again, that's just looking back up to the site again, and you can see just the site that we're looking at today, the house on it backs onto Dublin Road. So looking just down south of that site, you can see the red star at the top, and again, that's the site that we're looking at on the semi-house just next to it. And you can see along that road again that the houses really don't access onto Dublin Road. We have one plot there and it's currently vacant. There's an access. It accesses down onto that house just directly south of it. It's where that arrow comes out onto Dublin Road, there has been a recent approval for a house in there. But again, front facing onto Dublin Road. Most of all them houses along there are front facing, and that continues further down south. So any house coming out onto Dublin Road, it is the front of these houses. The area where people tend to keep clean and kind of keep that area of the property you know, look after it visually, and that's all fronting out onto Dublin Road, and they tend not to have access. So this from the south end of the site where we just looked before on that aerial, this is looking up towards to where our site is situated. And you can see there on the left hand side the entrance that's into that site, and again that's where there's been an approval for a house, and it's coming out front facing onto the road. There is another house, another entrance on the other side of the road. You'll see it there, the wooden fence, and again it's a front facing house out onto the road. And again, that's that site where there it's coming in that we've just looked at, where there has been an approval and it hasn't been implemented yet. And that's on further down that Dublin Road to the south as you're leaving out of Omagh out towards the countryside. And as you can see, the character along there, front facing properties, all with no entrances at this, but as you go on further down towards the development limits as you leave the town, the newer houses are being built down there presently. They have some access out onto the road, but overall these houses along this whole area are front facing, and where the access would come out onto Dublin Road for these houses, it would be an access coming into these houses that face out onto the road. Maybe a point of note is that the application or this road was a protected route before the new bypass was built, and then this no longer then became a protected route, which is the reason why we are getting an interest now for accesses coming out onto this road. So I think it's important that we try and protect character of the established character along this, and ensure that as part of the streetscape that we are designing something that is making a positive contribution to the local area in terms of having our access coming into the front of the properties, the area of the properties that people generally tend to look after and not store items. And this has a really good character coming into Omagh, and it's quite significant. So the recommendation, some of the recommendation is that the proposed access is contrary to policy and that the development would detract from the character of the area and does not make a positive contribution to the townscape.
Thank you, Louise. We have representations from the agent, Les Ross. We have representations from two objectors, Mr. McGrew and Mr. McCluskey, and we have representations from Councillor Bert Wilson, as you see from the agenda there. Les, see you online. You've got 10 minutes, Les, to present. We may or may not, as a committee, ask questions at the end. Are you happy to go?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay,
yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, away you go. Yep.
Yeah, just before I start, I should say on behalf of agents, congratulations to Deirdre on her retirement, and all the very best for everything that lies ahead for her. She's certainly run an excellent show in Omagh and Fermanagh and Omagh, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all agents when I say all the best to Hilda as well. I've always found her very approachable, an excellent planning officer. So I'll get on with it, Chairman.
Thanks very much, Les.
So thank you very much, and thanks to everyone in the committee for taking time to listen to me. The report suggests three issues as I see it, and Louise has done a good job there of describing the character of the area and explaining that there are no roads issues, there's no technical issues that prevent this development happening, and there's no residential amenity issues or what you would call design issues in terms of the garage. Now, in the report, I see the concerns relate to some cutting into the garden to create the access, the prominence that that access would have, and sort of how it would look, and then this disruption reportedly in terms of character. So I'll just address those briefly, Chairman. In my view, and I think the drawings spell this out very clearly now, the cutting is very marginal. You have a moderate slope in this garden. We're creating a flat platform within the garden to create the small garage. The amount of cutting, there's a bit of levelling out to be done to create that platform, but really the access more or less follows the existing levels of the site, and any cutting is very small. I mean, the sort of thing that you would do in your own garden without sort of noticing it. I would say it's negligible. So I think that the committee should dismiss that issue. In terms of prominence, I suppose until I heard Louise's report, I hadn't really got the fact that the prominence isn't so much to do with the garage itself. What I was going to say in those terms was that the garage is much smaller than the existing house, and when read from the road, it lies well below the roof line. That sort of integrates in with the existing quite well. But I think maybe the planning officer's talking about prominence of this driveway. Well, we're proposing new planting along the frontage, and you just have a small opening to, just a minimal to provide the cars to get in and out. So I don't quite understand that. Dublin Road's no longer a protected road. And when I get on to talk about character here, I mean, there's all sorts of different things going on along the road, and I don't think the introduction of another new access, and there are plenty along the road, will make any difference in terms of prominence. I think we're effectively mitigating that with some planting. So yes, character. I think Louise's presentation showed beyond doubt that there's a really mixed character. There's different uses going on along here. There are all sorts of different styles of properties. Some are fronting on, some look like they're fronting on, some, even the ones that are backing on, they're different levels, they're orientated differently, there are different styles. So really, the character is one of no uniformity, and there are no special designations in planning policy terms or any other terms. There's nothing written to say that there's a special character along this road, and I don't think there particularly is. It's just quite a nice urban area, but it's not particularly special. I hope the residents there don't mind me saying that. But so in terms of the reason for refusal, we're looking at DES2. Now, if we look at the more modern policies under the SPPS, and specifically paragraph 4.27, which is highlighted in your report, members, what it says there is planning authorities should not refuse permission on design grounds unless there are exceptional circumstances. So I do not see any exceptional circumstances for refusing this access and design grounds. In my opinion, there's just no harm to the character, which is already very mixed. And that means we are policy compliant with this proposal. So in conclusion, and Chairman, you know I like to try and wrap it up fairly quick. In my opinion, this is a very straightforward proposal. It will enhance the property greatly for the applicant. So I hope you'll consider approving it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Les. Concise as always, just under 5 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Members, you have the opportunity now to pose questions to Les if you so wish. If you do, please indicate. Any questions? Councillor Deehan, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Well, clearly, the key factor that we have to consider is the impact of this planning application on the character of the area. And the Dublin Road would be acknowledged as a very desirable place to live in Omagh. And certainly, since it is no longer a protected route, it does tend to be quieter in nature, apart from at peak times, where you have people using the Dublin Road as an escape route from the traffic. But aside from that, it is acknowledged as being a very desirable residential area. The thing that we have to consider is whether this proposal would detract significantly from that character. So do I take it from your presentation, Mr. Ross, through you, Chair, that the planting that is proposed would really camouflage this site significantly apart from the driveway into the garage? Because at the moment, what we see driving along the Dublin Road into the town is quite a bit of unsightly fencing and a little bit of waste ground. So can you give us more details about the planting? I mean, how wide would the driveway be, and how much of that would we see? And I take your points about the design of the garage itself and the levels and how it is below the level of the dwelling house. But can you comment further on the planning and the width of the driveway? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Les.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I didn't do the drawings on the application, so I can't tell you, I'm afraid, Councillor, exactly the dimensions of the access. But if you can take it from me that it's all spelt out on the drawings, and it would be a standard size of access that you would expect just to access a normal dwelling plot. In terms of the planting, I agree with you that what we have at the moment is rather unsightly, the way that the hedge has been removed at some point of time. I don't know the background to that actually, but it's been removed sometime and opened up. What's proposed is an evergreen hedge, a laurel hedge, matching, and I suppose with more of the character of what you see along the road elsewhere. And yeah, that will provide that'll close up this garden and tie it in with the dwelling house and tie it in with the character of the area a little better, I think, than what's there at the moment. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions for Les? I see none indicated. We're going on now, members, to representations from the two objectors. Because there are two, they'll get 2.5 minutes each. And at the end of it, the planning agent, Les, Mr. Ross, has the option of responding to any further issues that they have raised. And then after that, members, you may pose questions if you so desire to the objectors. Okay. Mr. McGrew and Mr. McCluskey. I've talked to Mr. McGrew before. Mr. McCluskey, are you there?
I'm indeed, yeah.
Yep. Well, look, the running order is such, Mr. McGrew got in first and then you're second, Mr. McCluskey. What I'm going to do with you, Mr. McGrew, is when I say that you are good to go, I'm going to time you for 2.5 minutes. And when the 2.5 minutes runs out, let's say you're finished. And then, Mr. McCluskey, that's your opportunity for 2.5 minutes as well. And then, as I've said before, the planning agent may respond to the issues that you've raised. And also the committee members may, if they so desire, pose questions to either of you. Okay, is that understood?
Sure.
That's okay. Mr. McGrew, I'm going to start now and you have 2.5 minutes. Okay, away you go. Mr. McGrew? Mr. McGrew?
Hear me?
Yep, no, we can hear you now.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to start again, restart. Okay,
Right,
you've got
okay,
2.5 minutes. Right, go ahead.
Thank you. Right. This isn't the first time that there's been application made for this part of the road. Previously, the previous owner, number 3, along with number 4, was trying to put 4 houses along there. Now we're down field is then going to be asked for permission to build a house in there as well. So it seems to be planned permission by stealth. I find that the property is too close to my own property and an invasion of my privacy, and not to mention how out of character for the area to have the proposed building erected in the adjacent garden of number 3 Lisson Court. In the early 1980s, my wife and I attended a site meeting with other interested parties with the developers, McAleer and Teague. From the plans, we choose our house because of the views and the privacy our back garden would afford us. Now, 40 years later, we find ourselves fighting to retain those values in opposition of the current developer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would hand over to Conor McCluskey, who will be a lot more eloquent in his speaking dialogue.
Thank you very much indeed. You only took 1 minute and 15 seconds. So, Mr. McCluskey, you have 3 minutes 45 seconds if you want to use them up. Are you there?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I suppose on the technical issue front, with previous entrances, I suppose 2 or 3 or 4 wrongs don't make a right in that regard. I suppose agents have to aim for a sort of domino effect, that the more entrances, the better. But it remains the Dublin Road a terribly badly surfaced road. It's a very fast road with no traffic calming. It's used as a shortcut, everyone knows, because of the traffic that builds up, especially at the weekends and Fridays on the Great Northern Road. It's no longer protected, as you say, that road, but it needs protection from the speed of motorists. This proposal is on a bend, of course, as well. They've recently put in a 30-mile speed limit on that portion of road, so that demonstrates that it is perceived as still fast and dangerous. The other entrances are for residential properties, which is a different matter as well. As David rightly said, I suppose we would tend to think that it's probably by stealth, property development by stealth, because it's worth bearing in mind that this application goes back all the way to roughly 2007. And at that point, the Planning Commission were unequivocal in their rejection. It had gone to that length in 2009. So this is perceived by the residents, like David and myself above him, as planning by stealth. It's a rejuvenated attempt. It's a very quiet cul-de-sac with 10 sites, but the actual area has a lot of housing around it. It's quite dense when you add in the Park Iman and the other surrounding parks. So it's already tight for space. The road has never been surfaced in the 26 years I've lived here, and David could probably verify that from his tenure as well. The surface is terribly degraded into our parks and will continue to decline if there are, as was intended, 4 properties, but now it looks as if it's a garage and then subsequent application for residential accommodation, which would not enhance the area in any way, which is a family park area with young families, rejuvenating the area again. So it would be in a different style. It would probably have a different motive from the point of view of the people planning to ultimately develop on it. I would mention the new cycle trail that's going in at the minute in the Dublin Road, and yet another entrance will jeopardise the safety of that for children and everybody using that amenity, which is environmentally friendly, of course. This is aimed at just the benefit of whatever happen to be the person who wants to develop ultimately on that area. And that would probably represent most of the points I would like to make. That's okay.
That's okay with me, Mr. McCluskey. You've done it. You have 1 minute and 20 seconds left, so thank you very much indeed. What I will now do is I will go back to Mr. Les Ross. Les, do you want to make any comment on the issues raised by the objectors?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for those comments. And I've listened very carefully to what the residents are saying. So I just picked up there and took a couple of notes. So in terms of residential amenity, I don't actually think that there is any impact in residential amenity terms. I can't see how this small garage at a much lower level than the existing houses could cause some impact, especially given the nature of the tall hedge and the fencing to each side of this garden. This garden's very well enclosed. So in terms of the roads concerns and access that was expressed, I just would remind the members that the road service is content with the proposal in every respect. There was a positive consultation response from DFI Roads. So there are no issues in that respect. In terms of the speculation about future applications, I'm afraid that's just something that's not for the committee to consider. It's just the application that's in front of us all today that we look at, and there's every opportunity, should the applicant, and I have no idea about this, should the applicant want to do something else there in the future, that's totally separate matter. And then just finally, I could hear some frustration regarding sort of the surface on Listen Court and some other issues in there. But I'm afraid, again, that seems to be nothing to do with this application. What we're just talking about is a small garage and an access out onto the Dublin Road. That's it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Les. Members, does anybody want to put any questions to the objectors? Councillor Deehan, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the objectors for coming along and addressing the committee today. And Chair, as I'm sure you will agree, and as Mr. Ross has said, we have to make our decision on this application purely on planning policy. So I just wanted to be clear, if I could ask Mr. McGrew. Mr. McGrew is very concerned and has expressed very well that, you know, he feels that the amenity of his property will be adversely affected by this planning proposal. Now, when Louise presented to us, Chair, we saw photographs of the adjacent dwellings, and certainly what I saw showed quite a bit of planting round adjacent housing. So I just wondered if Mr. McGrew could be more specific about the way in which he perceives this application to impact negatively on his privacy and on his living amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Josephine. Mr. McGrew.
Hello, Councillor Deehan. Councillor Deehan, can you hear me?
Yes, she could hear you, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, it's the fact that it's close to my property in someone else's garden that we're now going to have another development. Yes. And from our property, it will be seen. And as I say, going back to what I'd said earlier, I see the bigger picture where Mr. Ross has pointed out that it's not relevant here. The bigger picture is that there will be an application for a dwelling to go in there, and that'll add more to the area as well. And what all you have is another property in someone else's garden.
Chair, if I could just ask a supplementary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please. Ms. Chair, if I were to stand directly in front of the application site, Mr. McGrew, does your house lie to the left or to the right of the application site?
If you're standing on the Dublin Road,
directly in front, looking at it.
Yeah, I'm on the right.
You're on the right. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Councillor Thompson, Earl, you have a question?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, on a similar vein to Councillor Deehan, I would like to, if Mr. McGrew maybe could elaborate a wee bit more about the distance from his own house to where the application is. If he can elaborate a wee bit on that, and then maybe if Mr. McCluskey can elaborate a wee bit more on how this would affect him. Thank you, Chair.
But before we ask to answer that, Louise, could you possibly bring up some of the photographs? Or Darren? Probably the ones that were on the Dublin Road looking up at the back of the site, Darren, and showing. Yeah, that one there, I think, that one there. Is that better for you, Earl? Councillor Thompson?
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. I can see that. I would like to hear from Mr. McGrew.
Yep.
From a personal experience and what he envisages. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Chair and Mr. Thompson, from what you're looking now at the plans, I don't have them in front of me. whereabouts are you looking at the plans
we're
to
actually,
see what the distance are?
David, we're actually, the photograph is taken in the middle of the Dublin Road, looking up towards the
Right,
site
okay.
in question, and your house is actually slightly obscured by a light pole, a lamp column,
Right.
and we can see your house on the right hand side, and it's boarding. Your boarding comes the whole way down to the footpath on the Dublin Road, and it goes back up between the adjoining vacant site at the back of 3 Lisson Court. Okay.
Okay. Well, yes. Well, my property, my actual house building itself, comes across towards that fenced off area. I would be about 3 meters away from the top right hand corner, and then from that corner of my building down to the corner at the Dublin Road would probably be about 20 meters or so.
Yep,
Is there any other measurement that you require, Mr. Thompson?
No, thank you, Mr. McGrew, and thank you, Chair, for that. I'd like to hear now from Mr. McCluskey, if possible. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Thompson. I suppose the first way it impacts on me is David's been my neighbour for 26 years, and I know how much it has concerned him over the years, and not just obviously this particular planning application, but the previous ones that cause stress to people whose properties have borders, as you know. And David and many other residents as well, I would have thought, if they knew about it, for instance. But I also am concerned in the wider scenario that I live just beside David, and you might think, oh, it'll have minimal impact on somebody in my instance compared to David, obviously. But it's the whole area. It's the sort of congeniality of an entire area can be affected by continual development, which is detracting from, as you can see in the photograph there, a very degraded road surface, which is the same as the road surface going into the properties, the surrounding properties. And if you look back at the map, these properties were built around 1983, but they were always thought to be quite a small scale development in terms of space for the people in those amenities. They were not designed to be continually enhanced and continually sort of new planning applications further cluttering up what is already quite a densely populated part of the town. That's my opinion as to how it affects me personally, because we all, about 60 to 70 houses, all use the same access there, and we all have a very narrow road to navigate. Any further development there will just further compound that. But also the wider, as I mentioned, the cycle area on the Dublin Road, it is there to enhance the environmental aesthetic of an environment, to make it easier for children to access and for adults. Coupled with that, we know that is a really busy road. It's the busiest road in Omagh, coming into that side of the town on a Friday afternoon when the traffic is incredibly dense and fast, because people are using Omagh as a through fare to get to maybe Donegal or Derry or wherever it is they happen to be going. So on every level it impacts me as a neighbour of David, as somebody living in the area, but also somebody interested in the wider aesthetic reasons for wanting to live in an area, and also trying to protect what's good about areas and not constantly feel that they're under threat.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCluskey and Mr. McGrew. No further questions then. I will go
Can I just say,
sorry,
thank you, Chair, for letting me in. Thank you to Mr. McGrew and Mr. McCluskey for their answers. I'm well acquainted with the area. I'm originally from around that area, so I know it very, very well, and I know the issues. But thanks for letting me in, Chair. Thank you.
That's okay. Councillor Coyle, I see you've sneaked in, John.
Thanks, Chair. No, I'd like to ask Mr. McGrew, from the aerial photographs, the character of the estate itself seems to be large gardens, and I know that Mr. McGrew had said that he feels that they're by stealth, that an application will come in, to build a property rather than a garage there. And for me, I feel that his garden, it is very spacious, and I just want to question, is all other houses in the area of those same width and or area? Thank you, Chair.
That's okay, John. Mr. McGrew?
I don't understand the question.
I think the question is that, judging by the flat plan of Lisson Court, the amenity space of your gardens to the rear seem quite generous. And particularly when we look at the photograph of the Dublin Road going back up, your property comes right down to the footpath, near enough 20-30 metres. I think the question is, are the other houses in Lisson Court, do they have similar sized gardens to the rear?
I would probably
Louise,
have.
could you bring up the, sorry,
Start
Darren.
off with no to that one.
We're just about to look at some of the photographs that Darren stroke Louise are going to bring up.
I think the answer to that, Chair, is no, that the gardens would be smaller.
Right, that's okay. You happy enough, Councillor Coyle?
Yeah, no, just yeah, it's like, for me, regardless if Mr. McGrew's maybe a larger garden, but all the other plots seem to be well defined and spacious for each property, so it may detract from the amenity or the amenity spaces of those houses. So that's just what I was highlighting. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you very much indeed. You're all right, Mr. McGrew. You don't have to make any further comment. I think Councillor Coyle has got the information possibly that he needs. We'll move on now, and we have representations from Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson?
Chair, yes.
You have 5 minutes, Bert, so go ahead, please.
I was asked on behalf of an objector to air my views. I visited the site, and standing on the Dublin Road looking directly into the site, it is really a very small patch of ground, enclosed on 3 sides by 3 third-party properties. It is also very steep. On the right-hand side, it is bounded by a mature green hedge owned by some third-party person, and any excavation or laneway in close proximity will probably lead to this hedge dying. At the rear of the site, a solid fence approximately 6 feet was constructed by the family in the dwelling above. It has been, and any excavation will definitely affect this property. Any development on this site will undermine his garden, and someone has planted evergreen trees along the back of this fence. These are fast-growing trees and will probably block the views from the dwelling that I refer to, and overshadow the garden as well. The site will affect his property by causing soil movement if there is any excavation done in that area. On the right-hand side, there is also a very well constructed timber fence that I would take as Mr. McGrew's, and any excavation in this area would affect the fence, also undermine the foundation in those places. Any building on this site would be dominant and totally out of character in the area. There has been several applications on this site going back to 2007, also different appeals, and all have been refused. And I believe that nothing has changed for the better, and on behalf of the family, I would object to any building on this site. No development can take place on this site without excavation affecting the 3 neighbours. And Mr. Ross has stated that levelling and cutting would have to be done on the site, and to me that means excavation. So the site is really so small, and with being bounded by 3 third-party personnel is really leaves that site, that to leave the third-party properties without any danger of slippage or whatever, the excavation would need to take place quite a bit away from the extremities of the site, leaving really a very small insignificant site in the middle. And I don't see how it really would fit in with the neighbours and the damage that would be done to their property. Thank you, Chairman. That is what I have to say, and I believe that the two objectors that have spoken would be thinking, and I'll be agreeing with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bert. You've stopped within the time. Well done for you. Thank you very much indeed. I'll move now to Louise for any comments in regard to representations from the agent and objectors, and indeed Councillor Wilson.
I would just maybe like to remind members that the proposal before you is for a garage as an extension to the existing property. It's not a house. While there had been history before for applications, that's not before you today. So we have to assess this as an extension to the property that's there. In terms of Councillor Deehan's question about the width of the front of the access, I have the drawings here and I've measured them, and the gap along the front of the access will be 7 metres wide. The drive up to the property, that will be 3.8 metres wide. In terms of the distance from the neighbouring house, Mr. Grew's, over to the garage itself, that's going to be 16 metres. The garage, the location of the proposed garage from his the gable end of his house. Overall, I would say that the character of the area is material, and we do have to consider that. The SPPS 4.27 does say, continue on to say that the Planning Authority will reject poor design, and particularly proposals that are inappropriate in their context, including schemes that are clearly out of scale or incompatible with the surrounding area. So it's that incompatibility. Overall, I would say that the Lisbon Court is at a higher level. They are semis. They are backing onto Dublin Road. They were designed, they were not designed to be accessed off the Dublin Road. They were part of a different scheme. The houses that are being built along the Dublin Road, they are designed front out and face onto the Dublin Road with the accesses coming off that way. So this would have a different appearance of what's already on the Dublin Road. So it'll be up for committees maybe to decide whether or not they consider that appropriate.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments, Louise. Members, if you would like to pose any questions to Louise. Councillor Deehan, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder, Chair, if we could ask Louise to put up the photographs of the planting schedule, because I think this is a very important consideration to see in what way the building can be shielded from Mr. Mulgrew's residence in particular. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you, Chair. So the purple star, is that number 3? Is that the purple star represents what, Chair?
It represents 3 Lisbon Court, the address of the applicant. Okay. And you can see shaded is the garage. And yes, if you go sort of towards the right, you see the driveway. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So north of that line of planting at the position Y, that's Mr. Mulgrew's property, Chair, is it?
Yep.
Y, okay. So there is a
proposal. The top way, yeah, the top way, yep.
Yeah. So there is a proposal for planting along that boundary, and to the front as well, just before the entrance, all along that part, and then the entrance, which Louise has said is going to be 7 meters wide, and then the path of the driveway itself is 3.8 meters. There is a large existing hedge on the other side of the site. So my question for Louise, Chair, is does she consider, much of what is before us, Chair, relates to the residential quality of the area, and if this planning application detracts from it, The agent has said that it is mixed use area, and I would accept that because, as Louise has said, we have a cemetery there. We have a nursing home which has been converted into apartments. Further along the road, we have a new development which doesn't open up, which doesn't access onto the Dublin Road, but beyond that, some of the other properties do. So I would like Louise to comment on that mixed use on the Dublin Road, and also whether, in her professional opinion, the planting that is proposed would provide Mr. Mulgrew with privacy and would allay his fears in that regard. And just to finally, Chair, ask if we were to confirm a refusal on this planning application, would that detract from the amenity of the applicant, the resident of number 3 Lisson Court? Because my understanding is that a householder has a right to enjoy the amenities of his own property, which presumably would also include access to a garage. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, can I come in, please?
No, you can't. Sorry. Sorry, Mr. McGrew. I think that's you. You can't at this stage. You have no speaking rights.
Okay, thanks.
Louise.
Yes, Councillor Deehan, I can confirm that the landscaping that would be along that northwestern boundary, once it takes, it will protect the amenity of the neighbouring property, Mr. Grew's. There is a good fence there already. The site's going to be have excavation down, which will lower the parts of that site at the upper end. So even with the proposed location of the garage, if you're talking about the level of the driveway and the landscaping along that boundary, in my opinion, that would protect his amenity. In terms of even the landscaping along the front, it's open at the minute. With time, that landscaping will take. The driveway comes off the road. You'll have cars parked in around the back, and with time, that landscaping is likely to take and will filter the views up into the site of where the cars are parked in that. In terms of the amenity of the applicant's house, he has quite a large area at that top end of the site, and it is flat. He has a shed there at the minute that's up in site. It's a small shed. There would be sufficient room within that site if he wanted to put a larger shed up within that area to accommodate a garage. So I don't think there's any prejudice here that there's no ability within this for him to locate a garage that couldn't be accessed from Lisson Court into the site. And again, there is a fence there that currently divides the site up into 2, but that fence can be removed at any stage, and access down into that site can be come off Lisson Court.
Okay, Councillor Feely. Anthony, you have a question?
Thank you, Robert. And before I ask a question, I should have come in earlier on this. I just want to wish Deirdre the best of luck in her retirement and health as well. I was kind of late coming into the meeting when you were talking about it, so I'd just like to wish her the best luck. I know, as she said herself, we always didn't agree, but she was always, to me, she was always very agreeable. And we had some good debates at the time of the LDP now, but myself, my colleagues, it always ended up well. It was a bit of crack that time of them debates. Just want to wish her the best luck, and all the other members of staff the best of luck on the new post. Now, I was coming in on this was up to us before, wasn't it, Robert? And it was going to be built on blocks. This garage, is this the same one?
It was, and it was deferred back because there were issues with regard to the finishes, and I think it was referred to at the very start. It was supposed to be rough cast.
Yes.
But it was felt by the planning officer at that stage that was out of keeping with the design and build of the semis being in red brick. So now this current building is in red brick to match the brick of the existing house.
I was thinking that. I think I brought it up that time about that. So the point I'm kind of making, like, and Josephine said this earlier on, like when you're driving, I don't even know the road at all, I never was on that road, but there's a wooden fence and long grass going there, like it is unsightly looking, so maybe a wee small garage, tidily built and brick wouldn't look that bad. But the kind of question I was asking was to Louise that it's unusual, like that there's a row of houses there and there's no drivers coming out to the road there, like that Dublin road until further up the road. Is that anywhere else? Is there any other roads like that? I think it's very unusual looking. And then there will be a coming out for this garage here. We would be coming out on the road. Like, I'm not making any presumptions here, but like a wee small garage, whatever it would be that way looking of an age. So I think, but is there any other places like that? If you know what I mean.
No, I think the history of the site actually is Lisson Court was an extension of the existing Lisson development, and it's been in about 35, 40 years. The whole access, because at that stage the Dublin Road was the A5 and it was a protected route, so there's only one access into the original development, and that's why Lisson Court, as you can see from the block plans, if Louise brings it up, all the fronts of those houses front on to actual Lisson Court there, you can see. Yep. Lisson Drive, Lisson Court. And that was the original application, the original design, because there was only one main entrance onto the Dublin Road. And obviously, because of the design at that stage, that ground running down to the footpath on the Dublin Road was effectively the back garden of some of the houses. In other words, the adjoining house, Mr. Mulgrew's. And I think Louise has already stated that if you look on the enclosed red line showing the boundary of the site, there is enough space to actually access the garage from the front, not necessarily from the back. So there is the issue of where could a garage go? Does it have to go at the back? Does it have to go at the side? The applicant at the moment is choosing to put it down the back, and he's looking for an access onto the Dublin Road. And the officer has rebutted those with arguments in that regard. So that's where it sits.
It is fairly steep there. There would be a lot of digging to be done there. I take that. So it's a funny kind of one. I just thanks for clarifying that, Robert. That's okay. Thank you.
No, that's okay, Anthony. Thank you for your comments for Deirdre. She has taken those on board. Right, Josephine, unless you've some other question to put.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come in again. It's just that just if Louise could address my third question to her, which I think is really just the key question, because this is a very difficult situation, and really what we have to decide is whether there is the character of the area is really significantly distracted from if this planning approval goes ahead. Now, the agent had described mixed use along the Dublin Road and referenced the cemetery and so on. So I just really would need her comment on that, the fact that along the Dublin Road at this area, we have mixed use, particularly on the opposite side of the road, and you know, how that you know, in terms of the character of the area, which she has described it as a residential area, but the agent has referred to it as a mixed use area. So could I have her comment on that? And also, I think the point that Councillor Feely raises is a good one. We have already heard that a planning application for a dwelling on this site has been refused on a number of occasions. This is an application for a garage, as Louise has said, and not a house. But the way the site is at present, to me now, the way it is at present is significantly detracting from the character of the area. It's just a piece of waste ground, and certainly is very unsightly. So I just wonder if Louise would clarify that, Chair.
Thank you, Josephine. Louise?
Apologies, Councillor Deehan, for not completely answering your question before. Yeah, in terms of the mixed use, there is other elements of use within the locality. You have the cemetery across the road, and you do have the residential nursing home that's further south. fundamentally, I think as you're coming into the area, you do feel like it is mostly a residential area. As you're moving up, you do get the impression of all the houses are coming along the road. There is different uses. The cemetery and that is across the road from this. But I think overall, this area would be considered residential. So that would be my opinion on this. In terms of what was refused previously on the site, there was an appeal for a house on this site, and the Commission did refuse it, and it was the impact on character of the house coming directly out onto the Dublin Road. That was an issue that the PAC had considered and refused the application on. But again, this is not a house in front of you, and it's a different policy. We are assessing this under character, and it'll be DES 2 in terms of what impact that has with the garage fronting down onto the Dublin Road, and what that appearance will have accessing basically you're looking at an access that's coming into the rear of a property rather than the front of a property, where all the other properties along this road all front out onto Dublin Road. I do agree that the site itself is unsightly at the minute. It's not being maintained or kept. It has been fenced off from the property, and this has been done, I suppose, in the background with having a number of applications on the site to try and approve to get a house on the site. That they have not been successful. This is sitting at the minute as a bit of derelict ground, but it is still part of that courtage. It was what was approved, part of that semi-detached. It is within their amenity space, and we have assessed it and considered it as still part of that amenity space. So it still is within their remit to remove that fence and put up fencing along that Dublin Road and to maintain it. If it's unsightly, it's still within their control to do that. So I don't think looking at it and thinking it's unsightly should be enough to allow us to think this would be significant enough that we would allow this to be approved for something. I would like to see something developed in it if it is a garage and that. But I still would be of the opinion to approve a garage into the rear of a property. You know yourself, when you start to park vehicles and you're good to your property, go to the back of the house. It's trying to keep that tidy and clean. And to the front of the properties are all out on Lisson Court. And then with the drive coming up to the rear of the property, I think, in my opinion, this would be out of character with the established character along this Dublin Road.
Thank you, Louise. Members, before I take Councillor Thompson, I would point you to the recommendation for refusal. The refusal is that the proposed access doesn't say anything about the garage. It's the actual access is contrary to paragraph 4.27 of the SPPS and policy DES 2. So we are talking about the access, and as Louise has said, the amenity area, whilst unsightly at the moment, is still within the ownership of the applicant, and it's up to them actually to maintain it, or should maintain it, in a requisite manner. And it shouldn't be used as a material reason for trying to grant access onto the Dublin Road. Councillor Thompson, Earl.
Thank you for letting me in again, Chairman. It's just, I suppose, a quick one. It's with regard to, you're right, Louise, it is unsightly the way it has been left. Can you elaborate on actually who would have removed the hedging that would have been along there initially and left it in the way it is? Is that the applicant at the minute that has done that?
Louise.
I wouldn't be sure of who removed that. It was done a considerable length of time ago. I know it was done before the last application, which was in 2017. So when we went out at the site at that stage, that hedge had already been removed. So I wouldn't be sure now who removed that hedge.
Okay, thank you.
Right, members, I think I've allowed extensive debate on this issue, and particularly when we had objectors as well as Councillor Wilson presenting to the committee. We've had extensive discussion. I'm looking now for a recommendation. Councillor Garrity, Mary?
Yes, Chair, and apologies, very brief question, and you've raised a concern that just I was curious about myself. It's just access is a problem here, according to the report. My question is, if this is refused today, you don't get the garage. I know a lot of work has went into the deferral of this to get the garage looking more suitable. My question is, I'm not sure what the reason for this garage, whether it's for work purposes or one thing or another. The garage falls because of the access. Do you understand what I'm saying, Robert? I'm maybe confused.
Yeah, I know exactly. The application is for garage with access onto the Dublin Road. You can't disentangle either of them. If this is refused, then it's a new application actually to get a garage with an access coming in off Lisson Court. So it would have to be a completely new application.
Thanks for that clarity, Chair. Thank you.
Yep. Right, members, I hope there's enough clarity there that you can put your minds together and come up with recommendations, please, because we do need a recommendation at this stage. And I would remind you, if you look at the summary, it's one recommendation for refusal, and that's basically the proposed access is contrary to paragraph 4.27 of the SPPS and Days 2 of the Department's planning strategy for rural Northern Ireland. So, have we a proposal? Councillor Deehan.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing such an in-depth debate. And certainly, you know, we've had a very full discussion, and I want to acknowledge Louise's expert opinion in this matter. From my perspective, the crux of this matter relates to the access to the site and whether or not that detracts from the residential character of the area. If I recall correctly, planning officer did state that the previous planning application for a dwelling had been refused largely on access issues. The issues relating to the surface of the road and the busyness of the road and the condition of the road, in my view, is not material to this planning application. And I am satisfied from looking at the planting around the site that the privacy of the neighbours would be protected. However, the issue of the access is a significant obstacle, Chair, in my view, and I cannot see a way around this. Accordingly, I would like to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Josephine, and I appreciate your words of my latitude in regard to the debate on this, but it was an issue I think that we needed to talk through and get around our own heads. Councillor Thompson Earl, there's a proposal.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for allowing that very in-depth debate, and we've heard all views there. However, it has come to decision time, and I'm happy enough to second Councillor Deehan's proposal that we go for a refusal as per the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Earl. I've got a proposal and seconder to go with the officer's recommendation for refusal. All agreed? If not, a show of dissent now. I see no dissent, so I'm taking that as unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Louise, could you sum up, please?
The application is being recommended for refusal by committee members for the reasons listed within the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Louise. Now we'll go on to application number 4, and that's LA10/2020/0995.
Chair.
Who's that? Councillor Maguire, yes?
Sorry, Chair, just at this juncture, given that we're sitting for 2 hours, could I request a 5-minute break, please, Chair?
That's okay. Well, if that's the case, we'll go for 10 minutes. Tommy and Josephine, are you seconding that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's okay. All agreed? Great. You can turn your screens off and it'll come back on at 10 past. Thank you. So I'm going to resume the meeting. I'll just wait for everybody to connect on. Damien, I'm getting a bit of echo. Is somebody, is everybody connected in with their headsets here? Right, members, I might be experiencing a bit of echo here, but I'll get that sorted out. We'll go on now to application number 4, and that's LA 10 bar 2020 bar 0995. Darren?
Okay, members, so application 4 then, LA 10 2020 0995. It's an outline application by Mr. Wilson for a replacement dwelling and detached domestic garage. They're seeking to retain the existing dwelling then as a domestic store, and the location then is at 106 Gorton Road in Omagh. So I'll just take you through then, members. On the screen you can see the location of the dwelling. It's sited in the middle of a large farm group. Just context then is your settlement limit of Omagh is at the bottom of the slide. You can see as you come out of Omagh along the Gorton Road, which is the purple arrow, and you can just outside the town boundary on the left hand side then is the farm group with the yellow circle around it, and the site then for the new dwelling is in the position of the purple star. So the site location plan then that has been submitted by the applicant shows the dwelling to replace in green, which is on the left there of the slide, number 106. And you can see then the site for the new dwelling is shown by the rectangle within the red outline. And it's sited then in front of the existing farm group in the adjacent field. On the drawing you can see there's a purple dashed line. If members can see that in the middle of the screen, it's just annotated there. Purple dashed lines indicates at least 75 meters away from the farm group. So that's just some more details. I'll come back to that plan in a second. So that's the replacement dwelling in the middle of the farm group. And you can see that it's right in the center of the busy farm. So there's no issue here in principle of replacement of the house outside of the farm group because it would be unreasonable to replace it in situ given the amenity and the impact on the residents, and it's also a very restricted curtilage. The critical issue then relates to the off-site replacement and the location of where it's going to. So the proposal then is to replace it out in the front field to the position roughly and approximately in the position of the purple rectangle. Access to the existing farm group then you can see at the bottom is the purple arrow coming in off the Gorton Road. That's the laneway that comes in and serves an existing dwelling and then also goes around then to serve the farm group and the dwelling to be replaced. So one of the issues is in relation to the off-site replacement, and the agent and applicant have presented a case in support of the siting. You can see there's the dwelling to be replaced is in green, and then you have a purple rectangle with a purple star on it. The drawing is annotated to say that that's a new silage clamp or silo to be built there. It has not been constructed at the moment. The proposed size is below 500 square meters, and therefore the agent advises that it does not require planning permission and would be permitted development. If and when that shed is built, then the applicant is seeking to be 75 meters away from that building, which pushes the house out into the middle of the field to the proposed location as shown by the black rectangle. And a case is being made that they cannot site any closer to the existing farm group. The agent has helpfully provided some photo montages of the site. So this is the approach as you come towards Omagh from the Gorton direction. As you're driving along the road, you come along and the site then is on the right hand side. You can see over on the right of the slide, the furthest right, you can see the existing dwelling underneath the purple arrow. That's the dwelling to be replaced. And then the new dwelling is shown then in the middle of the slide and it's underneath the purple arrow. So the view then directly from the front of the site. So this is taken standing looking in towards the field. And you can see the trees in the background, and the existing dwelling to be replaced is actually in amongst those trees. It's well integrated and it's hard to see in the photograph. You then have the new dwelling, which is shown as the white two-storey house. The black lines then are the access lane coming in off the public road across the footpath and then into the site, and the winding sweeping driveway up to the dwelling, which is at the back. And then there's a rectangle around the site, which would indicate that that's going to be the large garden amenity area in front of the house. From the approach then, as you come out of Omagh, you're driving along the road looking down towards Coronation Cottages. You can see the trees on the left-hand side of the slide where the existing dwelling is. And then obviously the new house then is proposed as shown on the slide in front of you. So just in terms of critical views, members, the replacement dwelling then is shown on the screen in amongst the farm group. Some alternatives do exist up at that farm group, which would be suitable for the off-site replacement of the dwelling. And these alternative sites would visually integrate a new dwelling. They would also cluster and group with the existing building, meeting the aims and objectives of the SPPS and all planning policies. There would also be a suitable separation distance from the farm group to allow a reasonable sense of amenity for the occupants of the house. It would be unreasonable to put them right up against any existing silos or sheds, but there are alternatives here. So if you imagine you're standing on the laneway at the yellow star and you're looking in the direction of the blue arrow towards a small paddock, that's the view there. And you can see the small rectangular shaped field. It's beside an existing farm building, but it is suitable for a house, albeit it is immediately beside those buildings. However, the existing dwelling already is, and therefore you could put a house in here and keep the back hedge and some of those trees. In terms of other critical views, in if you're standing at the bend in the private laneway at the yellow star, looking out into the field directly in front of those sheds. So that's the view there you can see. So the farm group's on the left, and this is the field then running parallel with the laneway down to the existing dwelling, which sits at the edge of the Gortin Road. And you can see it's a fairly flat piece of land up in this corner of the field. You have the trees in along the left-hand side, and then the steep fall down, just as I say, beyond that. Again, just on the laneway, looking towards the farm group again. And that's your views there. So you can see the existing dwelling to be replaced in the middle of the group. However, there's a good mature boundary of trees and hedges along the front. And a site up in this area here would visually integrate and would meet all the relevant planning policies. So these alternatives are appropriate and suitable. In terms of the site then, it's down at the yellow star again on the Gortin Road, looking in off the public road towards the purple rectangle, which is where the proposed house is to be sited. And that's just a photograph looking in. And you can see the dwelling on the left then in the field directly in front of you. There's a low sparse hedge along the right-hand side of the boundary, a post and wire fence at the back, and then just a wider field in front of you. And again, just another view then looking towards the farm group with the large field then directly in front of you. And the hedge along the right-hand side then you can see it's about a 1 metre high thorn hedge. The frontage boundary then is the post and wire fence, as you can see. And that's just further back, standing from sort of the Gortin direction of the site, looking towards it. You can see the house that's to be replaced up in amongst the trees and then the large mature trees along the boundary. And if you recall from the previous slides, up in amongst those trees, in front of the trees, there are a number of alternative sites which would visually integrate a new dwelling and meet all policies, and also allow an appropriate level of amenity away from the farm group. The proposed site, though, you can see yourself, is just sited in the middle of the field, neither at the front or the back. It has a sparse hedge along one side and no boundaries along the other. So in terms of reason for refusal, just to summarise those, there's really 4 issues, members, that are critical here. The proposal is contrary to policy as the overall size and position of the new dwelling does not allow it to integrate into the surrounding landscape, and it will have a visual impact significantly greater than the existing building. It will also be prominent in the landscape and result in a detrimental impact to the appearance and character of the countryside.
We have representations from the planning agent, David McKinley, followed by representations from councillors Buchanan and Wilson. So we'll start with David. I see you on screen, David. Are you ready to go?
Ready to go, yeah. Just before I start, I would
10
like
minutes.
to wish Deirdre all the best in her. We've worked with Deirdre quite a while, so well done, Deirdre. I'm getting to that milestone, and I hope you enjoy your retirement. I'm ready to go now, Robert.
Right, away you go. I'm starting to watch now. Thanks, David.
To the chair and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. Background: Mr. John Wilson, the applicant, is the son of Drew and Annette Stanley, 2 brothers that have farmed the land
here for quite a while. These two guys are set to retire, and it would appear that the farm will more or less be run by John, next generation. John's the applicant. The Wilson brothers will split the farm upon retirement in the next couple of years, both brothers doing their own thing, with John and his father staying at home farm. It's important that John is located at the principal farmyard on the Barchin Road as the principal farm enterprise of Muckling Towers. We've located the dwelling in the best location suitable based on the knowledge of PPS 21 and the lending criteria for new dwellings in the countryside, and in particular their relationship in siting next to farmyards, not always creating conflict with planning policy, but can for a resaleable property if at any time the occupier loses the property. I currently have two applications, both nestled within the farmyard and currently not receiving funding because they're too close to our working farmyard. The dwelling, the reliance for that, I'll have to put in a further application to recite these, as the dwelling needs to be at least 75 metres away from the farmyard, which is a recommendation from the Environmental Health Department and lenders. While simply setting a dwelling close to farmyard, completely relying on the farm buildings to integrate the proposed dwelling is weighing thin with lenders, as the letter from Mr. McLaren indicates. I've submitted that through the application. To further clarify, sort of lending criteria is a material consideration. It's been noted in the planning statement that it's not. It has to be, if the dwellings are to be approved close to farmyards and have no funding to build them, these approvals are worthless and require a further application to resolve. The house has been replaced with a smaller two-storey dwelling with a simple form and sits, as the planner indicates, 50 metres from the main road edge. The dwelling sits only 100 metres from the existing buildings. When the new silo was constructed, a mere 75 metres. The applicant does not require planning permission to build a silo onto 500 square metres. The dwelling is not split from the farmyard, as is indicated by planning services. It's at the bottom of a steep field, with this being the levelest part of the field without actually digging into the hill. Planning have indicated that there's no visual linkage to the farmyard. This is fundamentally wrong. It clearly reads what the farmyard. It's on the hill just behind the dwelling. Remember, we're only 100 metres from the farmyard. The Clarify Planning Service have offered an alternative site, and Darren did do that. If we would go back to slide number 93, please. Slide 93, Darren, if you can. Yeah. The location that we mentioned was actually, it's elevated. I know Darren mentioned three alternative sites. One's within the trees, but it's within 75 metres. That was the first site. The second one was sort of between the bungalow and the nestling of trees. Now, as I come from the Barchin Road in, that's more exposed than mine is proposed at the minute. Secondly, we're having bother, and the lending letter that I sent in clearly indicates that a shared access can't be funded by the bank. I will have to create a new laneway into the alternative sites if that's the case. We have submitted 3 accurate 3D montages with given pictures of views from the approach to the site from Oma Town Centre at the entrance to the site from Barchin to Oma on a lay-by just before the turn up to Killiclougher on the right. On each photograph, you can clearly see the farmyard and the dwelling together. So to say it doesn't relate or visually link together is wrong. So consider all 4 objections now as they stand. CQI 1 was overcome if the committee agrees with that the site integrates an empty default with met conditions of PPS 21 and the site is approved. Points 2 and 3 and 4 are all CQI 13. Unusual to see them individually broken down. However, point 2, the farm currently has 3 dwellings. The 2 brothers, Stanley and Drew, lives at number 88 and 94. You would have seen that on the very first screenshot of overlay of the site. Both roadside development and a field width between both of them. Further along the road, John's cousin abides in number 100. That's at the entrance into the farmyard. Again, a field apart from the other 2 on the edge of the public road. Surely the development pattern has been determined already, and this is simply more of the same. Each of these dwellings sits at the proposed similar distances from the edge of the road, i.e. the 50 metres back in. They're actually sitting higher than the road. Actually, the 3 bungalows are sitting higher than the road. You would think they're prominent, but they aren't, and sit well as the roadside development. Our site actually sits slightly lower than the road, tucked into the start of a rather steep field. The proposal does not, in my opinion, carry prominence with the rising fields, pulls the dwelling into the landscape. Suitable degree of enclosures is not always from hedgerows. It can always be from landform, which this site has in abundance. The montages that I showed indicated on each of the three. The montage shows you leave home a background obtained from Coronation Cottages and the hills behind them. The adjoining electric pole, which was also visible on that photograph that we brought you back to, is the key. That's more or less where the house is in the middle of the field. It's also 8 metres high. So that indicates the scale of a dwelling and how well it can integrate in there. The land from either side of this proposal from this angle is strong. Note the start of the hill. If we move the dwelling closer to the farm, it rises up the hill, exposing itself as prominent. Photo 2, middle one, indicates the relationship with the farmyard. This is taken at the entrance where we've seen the lane go up into the house, our house, indicates the relationship within the farmyard behind. The yard sits almost the height of the dwelling, almost some 78 metres with tree line and large buildings on top of that. It's without doubt that integration is achieved from land from behind. Photo 3 indicates the view from Coronation Cottages. That's as you come from Coronation Cottages a little bit further away than Darren had shown. Note the land formed by way of a small hill adjacent to the road edge. This completely hides the bottom half story of the dwelling, whilst the remaining dwellings to the rear provide significant enclosure to the site. Point 4, reliant on new landscaping. Every application we submitted reserve modern space at some time or another relies completely on new tree planting. Every single application we submit will always require new planting of trees without any doubt. This application will also rely on a few trees and beach hedging. It doesn't need it to integrate, I don't think, on this occasion, as we have other forms of integration, but will further enclose and provide an immediate screen from the road, more for the applicant's private space than to integrate. I believe I've answered all the points raised and in some way clarify this unique situation. I don't often sit before this money, but I would ask to give this application support in this occasion, as it is a genuine case for a dwelling for the future farm worker and not a site for resale. This application will satisfy the needs of both John and his new wife. I thank you for taking the time and to listen to my side of the story. Thanks.
Thanks very much, David. Finished well within the time. Members, any questions for David? If you could indicate, please. Councillor Smith, Chris.
Thanks, Chair. I'm finding this idea of the 75 meters from the permitted development. Did I hear David right when he said he had 3 applications in for this 75 meters, and they also said that it doesn't require planning permission? I think I've picked it up wrong, Chair. I'm wondering if David could just kind of clarify it.
The 75 metre rule in every other district and this council is a requirement from the Environmental Health Department that sort of negates noise and negates smell. And that's quite prevalent in Strabane and Derry, as it is in Oma as well, but it seems to be a distance that is a safe distance for health and safety and for smell and for noise. That's exactly right. Lenders are having an issue lending money on anything any closer to that. I have 2 applications currently that I'll be putting planning application back in to get it further removed from the farmyard. But that's, lenders are becoming more onerous, and that's where we are. It's a resale, or the likelihood to resale a property that they're concerned about.
That's okay. Thanks, David. Thanks, Chris. Councillor Thompson, Earl.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank David for the presentation. Although in my side of things, it was a wee bit distorted, David. I can barely pick you up there. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But I think what you were saying there, can you elaborate on the 2 current farmers there? I know of the area, and the 2 current brothers that are farming. When are they hoping to retire? And obviously, John is the applicant, would be the next generation farmer. And is he going to be a full-time farmer there?
Yes.
And I take on board, I know it's not a material consideration, but the issues with regards to the lending issue is a very important one, and I take that on board as well. And with just last point there, the alternative sites, can you elaborate a wee bit more on those ones that you have actually put in for as well? Because I know Darren had shown us one site there, and I have my own issues on that one. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair.
To work backwards, Darren has indicated two sites, I think, two alternatives. One currently within the curtilage of the farmyard, which is a small garden to the side of the farmyard. I have concerns with that in 2 points. One, we're within 75 metres of a wooded farmyard. And secondly, I have issues with shared access to that site. There's one concrete lane that leads up to it. I'd have to create a new lane in front of number 100 and sort of bring it up round, or a parallel lane to the side of it. They won't accept shared access. But I do have another issue on that that's within 75 metres. The other site that he mentioned was the back of number 100, sort of between 100 and the farmyard. That is very exposed from, in fact, it's more exposed from Coronation Cottages. It's a Comintoma. The photograph that I indicated was between the bungalow and the yard. It looked very elevated. Yes, it had trees to one side of it, but there's nothing behind it. I would have concerns about skyline and integration on that one. Look, to be fair, where I've put the house is where landform works. The two brothers, I believe, maybe the next 4 to 5 years, there's talk of retirement, and rightly so, they're at the age for that. And it looks like John will be the farmer to take it on without going into too many personal details. I think that's as far as I can go on that one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Earl. Thank you, David. There are no more questions, then I'm going to go on to representations from the two councillors. Don't see any questions. Councillors Buchanan and Wilson. Mark, I think you're up first. I don't think you're presented before the committee. Procedure is you've got 2.5 minutes, and then I'm going to call you out and then hand over to Councillor Wilson. There will be no questions. It's purely just you making representations as a councillor. Are you happy to start?
Yes, thank you, Robert.
Right.
Thanks, Chair.
Away you go. 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, this proposed replacement dwelling, well, I see it as essential for the future sustainability of the active farm business that we've seen. And the application has been refused under policy CTY 13. Now, planning have acknowledged that given the restricted curtilage of the existing dwelling and its lack of amenity space, that there's no objection in principle to the off-site replacement of the existing building. So there's no problem with that. Now, when we look at CTY 13, well, there is a grey area there, and it's a matter of interpretation. What some would see as prominent, others will see as blending into the natural rural countryside, as we see in some of the photos that have been shown. Now, the rising landscape to the west of the proposed dwelling, with the trees and the existing farm dwellings and the hedgerows, and there's a small drumlin effect to the northern side, provides this site with the characteristics of a good rural setting for the farm dwelling, as I see it. Now, I note the issue by planning of visual impact from the Gorchin and Edenbrack roads. However, given the nature of this rural setting and other similar type dwellings along the Gorchin road, I would contend that this is not an issue, as it fits neatly into the topography of the landscape. Now, I would therefore argue that CTY 13 is no longer an issue, and would ask the committee to consider the approval of this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Mark finished well within the time. Bert, are you ready to go? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, Chair.
Go ahead. Start now.
Well, just before I do start, I want to point out, although this is Mr. Wilson, he is not...
No relation. Yeah, you've made that point. Yeah,
yeah,
right. Good enough. Yep.
Well, regarding the size of the farmyard or the farmhouse to be replaced, it has a massive 2-story dwelling right on the top of a hill, and I'm sure on some of the photographs that was plain to be seen. It can be seen from any distance, and if you applied for a house there today, there'd be no way that you would get it. The new site will be visible will not be visible until you are directly in front of it. With slurry tanks and animals, any future development would be restricted, and as a young man with new ideas, this would be his intention. That is the first reason the applicants or the planners refuse it. The second reason, the development would be on a lower plane than any dwelling on that road. The ridge height would be lower than the floor level of the farmyard, which is on the top of the hill. Contrary to planner's statement that prominence and impact or character would affect it, to me it would really have the opposite effect, being constructed on a level site underneath the hill with a level exit to the roadway, whereas planner's proposal would be an offshoot of the existing farmyard on top of a steep hill with a laneway excavated through the centre of the large 4 or 5 acre field. It would also be extremely dangerous for young children with slurry tanks and animals in close proximity. The site has a mature thorn hedge along the west and northern boundaries as planners agree. Although kept tidy and trimmed, this hedge has been there for 30 or 40 years and does provide a natural boundary with the steep hill to the rear, absorbing any impact on the appearance or character of the area. While the farmyard is a backdrop to the rear and also linked to the site, so there is no doubt that this is not part of the farm complex. It would also be a safe area for young children and to rear a family. The site would not need any landscaping or integration. It would sit naturally underneath the steep hill with no need for excavation, and the site planners would be proposing would be skylined and need a new laneway, approximately 200 yards long through a large field, creating an eyesore and a scar in the landscape. And I believe that this is an ideal site and safe for a young family. The site is directed really underneath the existing farmyard.
30 seconds left.
The view from the Eden Back Road will mean that the dwelling would be on a lower plane, but with the farmyard as a background, and would be linked and using the farmyard as a backdrop. Planners agree that this is a level site and needs a minimum excavation and could not be classed as prominent or detrimental to that character. In fact, it has a direct opposite effect. It's really a lot further back than most of the dwellings on that road.
That's it, Bert.
Thank you.
You've run out of time. Thank you very much indeed for your representations, and to you, Councillor Buchanan Mark. Thank you. We'll go now to Darren for closing remarks.
So members, just if I could take the first issue about this, the mortgage and the lending criteria in the 75-metre rule. Just to be clear, members, that the issue of getting a mortgage and lending is not a material consideration when you're dealing with planning applications. It simply is not. You don't have a planning policy for those who can get a mortgage and those who don't. The one planning policy applies to everybody, so no weight can be given to that. And they would be very concerned that that would set a precedent for really just setting aside the policy. I'm sure Philip can assist if members want assistance from the legal point of view on that, but the critical issue before you is, does the site integrate and can it accommodate a new dwelling? Whenever planners are looking at these issues of replacements, we are very aware that people have to have a reasonable level of amenity. So we wouldn't expect anybody to live up in a farm group. So the off-site replacement is acceptable. It's where the off-site replacement goes to. You're looking to get a site that consolidates in groups with the existing farm group as best you can. That's where officers are very willing in this instance here to discuss with the applicant outside of the application to see if an alternative could be found that would meet with his needs, but also meet the planning policy. The site that they're looking is separated from the farm group. It doesn't read with the farm group at all. It's over 100 metres from the group. You wouldn't even know it's a replacement dwelling. It's on a site that has no sense of enclosure. There's only one boundary along the side, which is defined by the low hedge. The other three boundaries, there's only a post-wire fence at the front and back. The house will sit in the middle of the field, as I say, neither at the front or the back, and will have no sense of enclosure. And you can see that clearly from the photo montages that the agent has supplied. Those photo montages are simply, an indication of how the building will look. They're not drawn using wireframe analysis or anything like that. So the visual impact of this dwelling sitting in the middle of the field will stand out. It will be seen on the main Gorton Road as you're driving in and out of Omagh and really have a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area.
Thank you very much, Darren. Members, any questions for Darren? Oh, Councillor Deehan, Josephine.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Darren, for your report and for your summing up. Now, one of the main points that have been made by the agent and the councillors who represent the applicant would be that, you know, that this site for the replacement dwelling would in fact integrate within the environment, because the existing dwelling is very prominent on the landscape, sitting as it does on top of a hill, and that the natural topography of the ground would ensure that there is a drumlin effect, so that the new dwelling would, yes, it would sit currently in the middle of a field, but that the hill would be behind it, and the ridge height of the new dwelling would be below the floor level of the existing farm buildings. In terms of integration with the farm reading with the farm buildings, if the new proposed silo pit proceeds and it's permitted development, then there would only be a separation distance of 75 metres, and this would provide linkage with the existing farm dwellings. And finally then, Chair, that if there is planting around this new proposed dwelling, that would actually provide a boundary. So if that could be added as a planning condition, would that ameliorate that particular point? So I'd be grateful for Darren's comments on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Darren?
Yes, Councillor, it's really the decision of whether it integrates is ultimately yours. As I say, professional advice from the officers is that it doesn't, for the reasons listed within the report. When you look at the photographs, you even look at the montages provided by the agent, you can see the house will simply be sitting in the middle of the field. As I say, it's neither at the front or at the back. It's just plonked in the middle. There is a gradient to the field, yes, and it does rise up towards the farm group, but the house will simply sit proud in the middle of the field. It won't integrate into the landscape at all in the view of officers. The fact it's replacing an existing dwelling, which is up on top of the hill, really is of no assistance to the applicant, because that existing dwelling is screened by the mature trees and also the existing buildings that are up there, so that it visually integrates, and in fact is an ideal example of rural planning and what way the rural policies are written to try and cluster and coordinate development all together. This site is separate from that. It's well over 100 metres from the existing farm group, as I say, in the middle of the field. The fact that the applicant wants to build a silo in the future, and this building, the new dwelling, may integrate with it, well, we have to consider the ground that's there at the moment and the circumstances that are there at the moment. There is no silo, so if the applicant builds it and comes back in the future, that would change things, but we have no guarantee whether it'll ever be built. We have no idea what it'll look like or the visual impact that it will have on the landscape. So you really must consider it on the basis of what's before you today. In terms of the planting, the policy is very, very clear, councillors. If the site works, you can augment it and improve it. But if it doesn't work, you can't make it work through planting. So it's very clear that that issue, and that's an long established planning policy that's been there for many years. As I say, members, officers are very, very willing here to work with the applicant and assist where we can. We are very willing to even meet out on site to look at alternatives to see if a site can be found that would meet the policies, either here up at the farm group or even elsewhere within the applicant's land, that we could maybe try and find a site that would integrate. But the site that's proposed simply does not.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further members with questions directed towards Darren? Councillor Thompson, Earl.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I picked up most of what Darren said, but Councillor Dehan had referred to the planting as a condition, and I think he said that, you know, what has been proposed, that's really ruled out. I'm just wondering, is there no way around that one, that there can be a proper condition put in there with regard to planting, that would take the view from the house, as you said, Chairman, or the planning officer said, is probably quite prominent in his view. I'm just wondering, is there nothing can be done with regard to trying to put a condition in there? Thank you.
Yes, so Chair, just to be clear, that the planning policies are written that you can't make a site, integrate by new planting. So if members consider the site integrates, you can augment it, you can make it better in terms of integration. But simply saying that you can overcome the policies by planting is something that the policies are not written to do, and would set an undesirable precedent, really, because it would mean anybody could get any site as subject to conditions. So that's been established for a long time, and there's numerous precedents where applications have been refused and people have offered to do that in the past. So I think it would be very unfair to introduce that now. As I say, the planting here will take a considerable amount of time to mature and visually integrate a site, because the site is so open on all the views, both directions coming in and out of Oma. There are clear views of this, and it really will stand out, and it'll be a long time before that landscaping would be sufficiently mature to integrate a new dwelling.
Darren, before we go on, could you bring up some of the photographs? Because I think the issue basically is the siting of the proposed dwelling. That's it in the field. If you could take up some of the photographs showing us going out Gortron Road, just the members. Yep.
Yeah, if I just go back, members, I'll take it back because agent has sent in photo montages, and I think it's only fair to present those. So that's the existing dwelling. You can see it up on the right hand side of the slide, and it's sitting in amongst the trees and buildings. So visually it's an excellent example of rural planning, and is what the planning policies are written to try and direct people towards. The replacement dwelling, then, the policies are written that the new dwelling should be clustered and grouped with that, and you can see then the location of the new dwelling separate from it. There is a small drumlin there, and you can see the hedge along the boundary of our site actually disappears behind that small drumlin, so that'll give you an idea of the height of that. That's the view then from the front. And then the view as you come down the Gortron Road towards Coronation Colleges, and you can see the house is just stuck in the middle of the field, to use a common phrase. If we go on down then towards the critical views, so that's the view then from the Gortron Road looking in towards the site. You can see the farmhouse up in the hill and the trees around it. And then you can see again, that's the view looking towards the farm group with the hedge on the right hand side and the laneway running along the other side of it. And the site then is on the left hand side of the hedge. In terms of an access, councillors, the planning department has no issues with new accesses to either new farm groups or existing farm groups. We allow plenty of approvals under the policy as a council for new houses to get new accesses for mortgage purposes. So there is no difficulty with that. The new laneways can serve the new house, or they can serve the existing farm groups, so that people get the agricultural traffic off the laneways. So there'll be no policy objections there, are there? And again, that's the view then, just as you come up from the south or from the Gortron direction towards the site.
Right, thanks very much, Darren. Councillor Garrity, Mary.
Thank you, Chair. And it's just to go back to something Darren said, in that we are happy to work with applicants and even meet with them and see what other alternatives. My question is, I think it'd be better if we'd all that done prior till today, and I wonder at what stage do those alternative sites be identified and posed to, say, David and applicants, and how much was there on-site engagement, Darren, for those to be identified with them at that stage? Because I think if there was a joined-up approach, and as you say, it's critical when you meet on-site and discuss with applicants and agents, something that you could see, maybe an agent couldn't see, or even the applicant when it's so in front of you. But my question is, when has there been a meet together with the three parties yet on site, and when was the agent presented with these alternative sites?
So the application, members, whenever it's gone through the planning process, at an early stage, officers did raise with me their concerns over the siting of this, and I have discussed the site with the agent. I actually went out to it before a recommendation was made by officers. So whenever we were going through the planning process, I spoke to the agent about this and discussed possible alternatives, but those were all ruled out, and the agent indicated that he would like the committee to make a decision on it. As I say, members, if you're indicating to the agent today that you don't think it meets planning policy, officers are more than willing to meet out on site, if needs be, to look at alternatives, and we will work with the applicant and be as flexible as we can to find a site that meets planning policy.
So sorry, Chair, just so Darren, you haven't met with David or with the Wilsons on site, it is all separate, and then recommendations through communication with David, is that correct?
Yeah, there's no site meeting because really with COVID we're trying to avoid meetings, as I'm sure you'll understand. But I have discussed with the agent over the phone, the farm group and the issues that are being raised, and the issue about the mortgage and lending, etc. But the agent, as I say, was keen for the committee to make a decision on this. If the committee's decision today is that there's concerns, then I think those can be fed back to the agent, and we could maybe look and work with the applicant. And if needs be, I'm more than willing to meet out on site to see if we can get a site that works here.
Yeah, just finally, Chair, I think that three-pronged approach is necessary, because not with saying David or any other agent, but so that the applicants are fully abreast of what their options are, so that's relayed back to them. So I think that would be most useful in this case, because I do think there's a need for this property, and I see that the applicants are not averse to a winding lane, but they have genuine concern from what I'm picking up regarding finance. I know that's not a material consideration, but I'm just encouraged that the officers want to work with applicants and try and get some resolution to it. So hopefully that will happen.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Councillor Thompson, Earl, you want back in again?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's, and I know what Darren's saying about the restrictions at this moment in time, but I think it is vital that there's a site meeting with regard to this application. It'll be outside in a social distance way, so I don't see what the big issue will be. So let's get that site meeting done, and I take on board what Councillor Gardy has just said there with regard to those issues. Finance, as Darren said, is not a material consideration, but it is a consideration in the councillor's mind and in the applicant and agent's mind. So I think it's vital that a site meeting takes place between the planning officers, the agent, and the applicant, who will get someone around some solution to this issue, because this young man is going to be a future farmer, and he will be the farmer. The other two guys are going to retire very shortly, so we need to get that resolved. So I formally propose, Chair, that there's a site meeting takes place in the not too distant future in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a proposal then to defer for a month to facilitate an on-site meeting between the applicant, agent, and our planning officers. Do I have anybody to second that? Councillor Robinson?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further proposals? No, all agreed?
Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Deehan, Josephine.
Could I just clarify? Yes, I do support the call for a site meeting, but would that be for examining the existing site, or would it be for the purposes of exploring alternative sites?
It's everything, Josephine. I think the issue is becoming apparent that mortgage companies don't want to lend on shared access. That is not a material consideration. So I think our officers actually have to emphasise that and look then towards solutions that can, from an applicant's point of view, get round that issue, but also that will fall within our planning policies. And I think to do that obviously needs a mature conversation on site, so that the applicants are fully aware of what policy means and what we as committee members have to implement in regard to policy.
Well, it's just, Chair, that the planning officer, Darren, has been very explicit in his guidance to us, and we have questioned him on it, and that is the question of integration of this site, even taken into consideration the drumlin topography of the area. So I'm just wondering, you know, can we possibly look at alternative sites as well?
Oh, we are. That is going to be part of the discussion, Josephine. Sorry if I didn't actually make that clear. So look, we've got a proposal to defer to facilitate a site meeting on site. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on now to item 8 on the agenda, and that is to note the schedule of planning decisions issued in February 2021. I will point out that you will note both from the delegated and the committee list, all were approvals, there were no refusals. So I have a proposer, Councillor Thompson.
Happy to propose the noting, Chairman.
And Councillor Robinson, happy to second. All agreed? Great, thank you. Move on to item 9, and that's to note the update report on planning enforcement, paper D. Any questions? If not, I'll take a proposer and seconder to note. Councillor Deehan, proposing.
Post to note.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Maguire, I see your hand, your finger up, sorry. Thank you. All agreed? Great, thank you. Item 10, and this is to consider report and call response to call for evidence for the review of the implementation of the Planning Act NI 2011, paper E. And do I defer to Deirdre?
Members, you will recall at the last planning committee we had tabled this correspondence from the department, and they had allowed us 4 weeks to get a response back, which members had sort of indicated some disagreement with that in terms of being allowed sufficient time to pull together a response, and also then for consultation with full council at the R&C committee. The department has extended the consultation period until the 16th of April, which has allowed us to bring the suggested response to the planning committee for a comment and agreement before consultation with the R&C. Now, the R&C committee is on the 20th of April, which is after the date, but the department has agreed that once we get agreement from yourselves, if we submit that as a draft response prior to the 16th of April, we can then add any further comment following the meeting, the R&C committee meeting on the 20th. So basically that sets out our concerns or things that need to be looked at in the Planning Act. But what we've suggested is the department has indicated this is going to be a light touch. It is not a fundamental review of the Planning Act or the planning legislation. And because there has been no review since transfer or since the Act came into operation on the 1st of April 2015, our view is that really we should have a fundamental review of the Planning Act and all planning legislation, particularly the legislation around the local development plan. And as you're aware, when we sort of set out the time period for preparation of the local development plan was a lot shorter than what it has turned out. And that is partly due to all the requirements to advertise and reconsult. And there's a lot of legislative requirements that are slowing the whole process down. So the proposal, whereas we have highlighted some issues in the draft response, there would be a request to the department to actually carry out a sort of a fundamental review of all planning legislation. And I think that has been a similar request has been made by the Assembly as far as I know. And I know other councils are also raising concerns that they're not looking at the entire legislation or the legislation in its entirety. So that would be a starting point. And then, as I say, the various issues we have raised there that members have in the past highlighted. And as we know, there was the recent issue around service of BPNs. We have issues with predetermination hearing. There's also been issues around what constitutes a valid application. And at the moment, you really require very little to make an application valid, which means that we then have to go looking for information that we need to determine it, which slows the process down. So a fundamental look at that as well in order to sort of increase the ability of councils to ask for additional information before an application is made valid, so that we do have everything in front of us to enable a decision to be made. So that is our suggested response. I'm not sure if members have any comments on it or would like anything added. The one thing we haven't included there that I would like to include as well, and that's around the need to advertise. And that's throughout both planning applications and local development plan. We have a requirement, particularly in the local development plan, to advertise in the Belfast Gazette. And really, it's not a sort of newspaper that would be read by every household in Fermanagh and Omagh. And really, the requirement under legislation to have to do that doesn't seem to be necessary. And it really is to sort of look at, you know, where can we advertise? At the moment, we spend quite a lot in advertising our planning applications every week in the newspapers. Is there sort of a cheaper way of doing that, or is there other ways that would reach the public or inform the public of the availability of applications and the viewing of them? So we propose sort of putting that in as well as something that is looked at and reviewed again.
Thanks, Deirdre. I'm mindful that this has been issued for members' comments prior to this, and obviously has been attached with the papers. So if you have any comments, I'd like you to make them fairly shortly. But Councillor Feely, Anthony, do you want to make a comment?
No, I'm just going to be brief too, Rob. It's just a pity that we weren't going to have it before our other meeting, you know, there. But we'll wait to see what other councillors think. But I was going to propose a note there, but if other councillors want to make comment first, it's okay.
Well, I'll take your proposal to note, but I can take other comments in between as well. Yeah. Thank you. Any other members wish to comment?
Councillor Thompson.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Councillor Thompson Earl, I think you're bouncing in about there.
It's not really a comment, Chairman. I'm happy enough to second Councillor Feely's proposal to note at this stage, and if anybody else wants to come in, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, any further comments? It's a fairly detailed response. We've had a look at it, and it does highlight a lot of the issues that we as committee members and as general members of council have experienced over the last sort of 6 or 7 years. All I can say is if you have any additional comments that you may think of post the committee, I'm sure that Deirdre up until the end of the month, or Sinead after that, will take on board before the paper is actually presented to RNC in April. So you still have further time to actually make representations. That said, I've got a proposal to note what we have in front of us. All agreed? Agreed. Thanks very much indeed. Move on now to item 11, and this will be good news, I think. I'll go back to Deirdre again. A copy of the correspondence is attached.
Members, this is just correspondence from the Department for Infrastructure, just to advise that our draft plan strategy has been submitted to the Planning Appeals Commission for consideration. So this is another major milestone in the preparation of the local development plan. And thanks have to go to Sinead and the development plan team for getting all the documentation together, for sending up to the department, and for all the members' input into the strategy. And hopefully, with a fair wind, we should have an independent examination sort of late summer, September, October, if everything goes well. But I have no doubt there is likely to be further correspondence from the Planning Appeals Commission in terms of clarification, and if there is, we'll obviously bring that to members for decision and information.
Thank you very much, Deirdre. As a comment from the chair, sorry.
I just didn't know if Sinead wanted to add anything to that.
No, Sinead's okay. Just a comment from the chair before I let Josephine in. I think this is a milestone for the council. We've had a few hiccups along the road, and the programme timeline has been elongated, but everybody's programme timeline has been elongated. Thankfully, the department have no real issues or highlighted back to our officers, apart from a few ones that we know will be likely to raise a few backs, but they actually haven't bounced it back on that. It's good to see. What I will say for those members that sit on the local development plan steering group, we will have to bring this forward. I see Sinead saying that anyway, and look towards how we're going to resource it in regard to communications with PAC and onwards representation when we get a timeline with regard to dates and everything. Because judging by what Belfast City Council has gone through, we will need to have resourcing issues on the day and protocols in place for our officers with regard to what they can and can't do at the hearings and how they actually deal with any issues that arise from within, from whatever quarter. But that will come through the LDP and we can talk that, and then that'll go to RNC. Councillor Dean, Josephine, sorry I cut across you there.
Thank you, Chairman, and I fully support your comments, and I want to thank Deirdre and her team for the enormous amount of work that they have put into the preparation of our local development plan, which has been subjected by members to immense scrutiny. And it is very, very good to see that now this draft plan has gone for independent examination. So I welcome that and thank all concerned, and I want to propose to note, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Thompson, are you seconding, Earl?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll second Councillor Dehan's proposal and thank Deirdre and the team for all of their work. It has been a long, hard road, but it's we're getting there, I think. So happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, yeah, thank you, Mary. All agreed? Agreed, thank you. We've no other correspondence. Item 12, any urgent and relevant business. Nothing has been intimated to me to be taken. Oh yeah, Philip? Are you still awake, Philip? You could be lying back in your chair with a pina colada for all we know, my good man.
Well, I'm still shocked and stunned by the conversation that was being had before the committee started, Chair. So,
right.
No, Chair, this is just to update members in relation to a judicial review application of some vintage. Members may recall that an application to seek leave to apply for judicial review had been brought by Port and Road Environmental Limited in respect of planning application LA10 2018-0832 for 6 self-catering holiday cottages and alterations. Chair, the application for leave, judgment in respect of the application for leave was handed down this morning, and leave has been granted, Chair. So that's it's extremely unusual that it should have taken 2 years to get to this stage. There were a number of points discussed, Chair. I haven't yet had access to the full written judgment, but a summary of the judgment was given orally by Judge Schofield this morning. Essentially, Chair, the Council had made a preliminary point in relation to this matter that the application had not been properly brought, in that it had been brought by a company which had not employed a legal team. Companies aren't allowed to take forward applications for judicial review without employing a solicitor. And the court found that as a result of the company having obtained a solicitor following a last chance direction by Mr. Justice McCluskey back in March of 2020, that he would allow the case not to be dismissed on that basis. So he then considered 4 issues in and around leave, Chair, 1 in relation to merit, 1 in relation to standing, 1 in relation to delay, and then an issue in relation to costs. So in relation to leave, as all members will know, the threshold is very, very low, and he therefore held that leave, that the merit test had been passed in respect of leave, without obviously making any direct comment in respect of the merits of the application as a whole. In terms of standing, he indicated that yes, there was standing, and that at least 1 shareholder in the company would have had an interest in the case. In terms of delay, he indicated that although the proceedings had been brought irregularly by the plaintiff, they weren't a nullity, and not all of the delay could be attributed to the plaintiff in this, or the applicant in this case. Indeed, you know, between March 20 and November 20, the court itself had a significant delay in the case. No delay at the doors of the council, I should hasten to add, Chair. In terms of costs then, and this is really where I suppose the judgment this morning was quite interesting, There had been an application, and as members will be aware, in environmental cases in respect of the Our House Convention, there are rules in terms of the level of costs that can be awarded. And the applicant had applied that the amount of costs that could be awarded against him if he is unsuccessful, or if it is unsuccessful in this case, should be reduced from the maximum of £10,000. The court refused that application and said no, the maximum costs should apply to this case, and also expressed concerns about the ability of the company to meet those costs in the event that the case was unsuccessful. So the court has granted a security for costs order, which means that if the applicant is to progress this case, they are required to lodge £10,000 into the court within 2 weeks of today's date. So there's no timetabling issues at present, because the court indicated it would wait and see whether that money was lodged before it made any directions in relation to timetabling. But it did indicate that it wished to see this matter progressed quickly because of the delay that had been involved in it, and it has sought to narrow down the issues in the case as well. Chair, a long time to get to this point, not a particularly surprising outcome in terms of application for leave being granted, having reached this point. And obviously we'll now progress the case to full hearing in due course and keep you updated as we go along. Happy to answer any questions that members have, although if it's in and around issues, it may be necessary to deal with those in committee.
Yep, that's okay. Yep. Thanks very much for that, Philip. You recovered well there when you were put in the spot. Members, any questions for Philip? He's got his cheery face on now, so he's obviously looking to the end of the meeting. I don't see anybody rising to the bait, Philip, so you're all right. I did say there was no urgent and relevant business appointed to me. Yeah, you okay, Anthony? You're all right. We'll now go into the last item, and we have to go into committee for it. So I need a propose and second to go into committee. Proposed, Councillor Coyle, second, Councillor Thompson. Recording back on, Damien. Sorry, members, it's not too long now. Okay, recording back on. Kim, could you summarise what the committee did in confidential?
Chair, during confidential business, members considered matters arising from the 27th of January 2021 meeting of the committee, and there were no matters arising.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, you will be pleased to note that that concludes the business of the committee. Thank you very much indeed. Some of the items were elongated, but I think the discussion was very full, very meaningful, and will aid us in our debate on further issues going forward by helping with our general knowledge around planning issues. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of your